I never liked driving out this far at night. The highway narrows to a thread, and the trees on either side leaning like they're trying to whisper something. I keep my hands on the wheel a little too tight, my eyes flicking to every dark stretch of road, half expecting something to step out from the shadows. There's a part of me that tells myself it's just the isolation, just the quiet, but that doesn't make it any easier. Out here, the world feels hollow, like it's holding its breath and waiting for me to notice. Tonight, I'm headed to the old radio tower on the east edge of town. Routine patrol. Check the place. Make sure no one's squatting inside. Maybe knock on the generator shed to see if it still runs. The tower's been abandoned for years. Rust creeping along the steel frame. Weeds clawing to the concrete. And the faint smell of oil and rot that seems to cling no matter how far you stand from it. It's not the kind of place anyone goes unless they're looking for trouble or ghosts. I reach the gravel driveway and slow the cruiser. The beams of my headlights cut through the darkness, highlighting the metal skeleton of the tower. It's bigger than it looks from the road. Shadows crawl along the lattice, twisting in ways my brain can't quite process. I park and step out, the gravel crunching under my boots, and the night wind hits like a cold wave. My breath fogs in front of me, even though it's not that cold, and I pull my jacket tighter. Something about this place feels off tonight. I check the perimeter first. The chain link fence is intact, but the padlock is hanging loose, swinging slightly even though there's no wind. Maybe a raccoon, maybe a kid, probably nothing. I shake my head. I've been doing this long enough to know that probably nothing is never reassuring. My flashlight beam sweeps across the yard, catching on scraps of rusted metal and the cracked asphalt of the old parking lot. Every sound echoes here. A bird rustles, gravel shifts. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snaps. My pulse jumps, and I remind myself to breathe. Slow, even. The radio shack is a small, corrugated metal building at the base of the tower. The door squeaks when I push it open. Inside, dust hangs in the air like a thick fog. The smell of old electronics and mold hits me, familiar but unpleasant. I sweep my flashlight across the room, past the old control panels, the tangled wires, the papers yellowed with age, and then I notice the radio. It's on, not just on, but silent. No static, no crackle, no hum of dead air like I was expecting. It's just there, a perfect, unnatural quiet. My finger hovers over the power switch, half expecting it to spark or die, or do something that feels real. But it just sits there, glowing faintly like it's breathing without sound. I take a step closer, and the air seems heavier, like it's pressing against my chest. I tap the side of the unit. Nothing. I lean in, half expecting to see some hidden speaker or a broken wire sending a phantom hum. Still nothing. I frown. I've been a sheriff long enough to know when something doesn't belong. And this quiet, is wrong. It doesn't feel like the absence of noise. It feels like something else is listening, waiting. I check the rest of the shack. Old charts pinned to the walls. Maps of frequencies that no one uses anymore. Dust motes float in the beam of my flashlight. I notice my own breathing, loud and ragged, echoing off the metal walls. For a second, I can almost hear something else. Faint, like a whisper buried beneath the hum of my own mind. I shake it off. Probably just the building settling. Old towers do that. But then I notice the chair. The swivel chair by the control panel has been turned slightly. Not enough to suggest someone sat there recently. Dust is still thick on the seat, but enough to suggest a presence. My stomach twists. I haven't been here 10 minutes, and already the tower is playing tricks on me. Maybe it's the isolation. Maybe it's the fatigue. I've been on shift for 10 hours, and the dark has a way of stretching your imagination into something grotesque. I walk around the room slowly, shining my flashlight across every corner. My boots scrape against the concrete floor, and I can't shake the feeling that each step makes the shadows lean closer. My reflection stares back at me in a cracked panel, pale and drawn. I tell myself it's nothing, just an old building, abandoned and lonely. But the air is heavy, almost viscous, and it makes it hard to think. The radio draws me back. I kneel down in front of it, curious despite myself. The screen flickers faintly, like it's alive. I twist the dial just a touch, and expect a crackle of dead frequencies. Nothing. Complete silence. No feedback, no hiss, nothing. I press a few buttons, check the antenna, tap the wires. The tower should be dead. A relic of a time when this town mattered in the airwaves. But it's not dead. Not really. It's waiting. I lean back against the wall and rub my face. Sweat has started to bead at my hairline. Even though the night is cool, my mind is racing. I tell myself to calm down. Maybe it's just a short. Maybe a ghostly old tech that somehow still draws a little power. Rational explanations. That's all I need. I'm a sheriff. I deal in facts. But the deeper thought sneaks in anyway. What if it's something else? Something I don't understand? A sound makes me start. A single tap, like fingernails on metal, coming from the corner of the room. My flashlight swings toward it, but the shadows are empty. I blink. Nothing. I tell myself I imagined it. I tell myself I've been here before. Late nights on patrol, listening to creaks, the wind in the eaves. But this feels different. The stillness presses down. It's not just the quiet. It's the absence of anything else. A vacuum that seems to pull at the edges of my mind. I take a deep breath. Look around again. Empty room. Dust. Shadows that don't move. But the radio, it's still there. Silent. Perfect. Watching. Maybe. I sit in the swivel chair. Just for a moment. Leaning back. The metal squeaks under my weight. I can't explain why I do it. Maybe curiosity, maybe foolishness. But I feel drawn into it. Into the stillness. Into the quiet. I lean forward and press my palm against the radio. Warm. Not hot, not powered. Just warm. I pull my hand back, heart hammering. This is impossible. My mind tells me it's impossible. My eyes tell me something else. And then, just as I'm about to step back, the room shifts. Not literally, but the air changes, heavier, darker, as if the walls themselves are closing in. My own breathing sounds like thunder in my ears. I try to shake it off. I check my watch. midnight. Perfectly ordinary. But the ordinary feels like a lie here. Every noise is magnified. Every shadow has a shape. I glance at the door. Outside, the wind is picked up. Trees scratch against the metal siding. Something almost like laughter, or maybe crying, rides in on the breeze. I spin around. Empty. I can't see anyone. No one is there. I sink to the floor, back against the wall, flashlight trembling in my grip. I tell myself to breathe. Just breathe. I've been alone and worse. But the radio, silent, waiting, keeps pulling at me. I feel it in my chest, a slow, creeping dread that isn't just fear. It's anticipation. Something wants me to stay. Something wants me to watch. Something wants me to see. And I don't know if I should leave. I don't know if I can. Outside, the tower creaks. A long, drawn-out groan, like metal bones straining against the dark. I close my eyes for a second. When I open them, the radio is still there, silent, waiting, and I realize with a sinking certainty that this night is only just beginning. I stand, step toward the door. The wind rattles the shack. The silence presses against me from all sides. I glance back at the radio one last time. No static, no signal, nothing, just a perfect, unnatural stillness. I pull the door open, and the cold night hits me like a wall. But even out here, under the sky, under the moon, I can still feel it. The tower watching, waiting, and I know, deep down, it's not done with me yet. I didn't sleep much after that first night at the tower. Even when I got home, I kept hearing that silence in my head. Too clean, too deep. It was like my mind kept replaying the moment the static disappeared. Like my ears were searching for something that wasn't there anymore. By the time I went back out there the next evening, I told myself it was just unfinished business. Just curiosity. That's all it was. But the truth is, something about that tower had dug under my skin. The sun was already setting when I parked the cruiser at the fence line. The metal frame of the tower caught the last bit of light, turning blood red against the sky. The air smelled like rain, though the sky was clear. Everything looked ordinary. Too ordinary. The kind of quiet that feels like it's waiting to be broken. When I stepped into the shack, it was exactly how I'd left it. The dust, the rust, the faint smell of burned metal. But the radio was on again, still glowing, still silent. I stood there for a long minute, listening to nothing, trying to convince myself I was imagining the faint tension humming through the room. Then I heard it, a voice. It wasn't clear, not like words exactly, more like a breath caught in static, just a whisper, soft enough that I thought it might be the wind outside. But then it came again, faint, low, right behind the hum of silence. At first I couldn't make out anything, just fragments, like a broken signal trying to tune itself. A sharp inhale, a syllable, a sound that could have been my name if I listened too hard. I stepped closer. The voice stopped. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I tried the dial, hoping to hear static again. Anything that sounded normal, but the knob barely moved. It felt stiff, like someone had glued it in place. And then, the whisper came again, clearer this time. It said, "Don't." I froze. Every part of me went cold. My hand was still on the dial, but I couldn't move it. My eyes locked on the glowing green display. I waited for the word to repeat, but it didn't. Just silence again, thick and heavy, pressing against the inside of my skull. I backed up a step, scanning the room. No one, nothing, just me. I told myself it was interference. Old wires, cross signals, maybe picking up some stray frequency from a ham operator. That happens, right? That's all it had to be. But the longer I stood there, the less I believed it. The air felt wrong. The kind of wrong you don't notice until it's crawling over your skin, like static made of air instead of sound. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside. The tower loomed above me, stretching into the night sky like a broken finger. Wind brushed through the wires, making them hum. But it wasn't just wind. There were tones in it, notes, almost like the tower was singing under its breath. And then, from high above, I heard the same whisper, a breath of a voice, slipping through the wires. This time it didn't sound like "don't." It sounded like "listen." My flashlight trembled in my hand. I tilted it upward, the beam catching on the tangle of cables. The wind moved through them, and for a second, I could swear I saw something shifting in the pattern, like shapes, like faces. I blinked hard. Gone. The longer I stood there, the more the wind began to sound like a dozen people murmuring just out of earshot. I could almost catch a word before it slipped away. Names, numbers, a laugh. My stomach tightened. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't unhear it either. I went back inside, shut the door, and turned off the flashlight. I wanted to prove it to myself that it was just in my head. But in the dark, the whispers didn't stop. They got louder, soft, layered, dozens of voices. Some too faint to understand, others too close. Some of them sounded like they were speaking through water. Others like they were right beside my ear. I stood still, not breathing. My fingers brushed the radio again, and I swear I felt something under the surface. Like a pulse, I said out loud, "Who's there?" No answer. The room felt tighter. I could hear the wind shaking the tower outside, the metal groaning. And then, somewhere inside the static of silence, a voice rose just above the rest. It said, "Help us." It wasn't a request. It was a command. The hair on my arm stood up. I stumbled back, hitting the wall, eyes locked on the radio. The glow flickered. I could feel my own breath coming too fast, my thoughts scattering like leaves. "Help us." Again, over and over, soft at first, then clearer. "Help us." Each time, the voice was slightly different. Male, female, old, young, all saying the same thing. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was coming from the walls, from the floor, from the tower itself. And then, just like that, it stopped. The silence came crashing back, even louder than before. I stood there shaking, my throat dry, my pulse hammering. The room smelled different now. Burnt dust, ozone, like lightning had passed through it. I wanted to leave right then. Every instinct told me to walk out, get in the cruiser, and drive until the tower disappeared behind me. But I didn't. I needed to understand. Needed to know why that voice sounded so human, so desperate. I turned the flashlight back on and scanned the walls. My light caught something near the corner, an old maintenance log pinned under a cracked clipboard. Dates from 10 years ago, notes about frequency tests, generator issues, power surges. The last entry caught my eye. It said, "Transmissions received, unverified source. Do not respond." No name, no signature. Just that, my throat tightened. The log was dated the same week the tower shut down for good. I stared at the note until my vision blurred. The silence pressed closer again. My ears rang. I looked back at the radio, and for a second, I thought I saw movement in the reflection of the screen. Not behind me, in it, like something was shifting inside the glass. I leaned closer. A faint shape formed, too blurred to make out. A shadow of a person, maybe just standing there. I blinked and it was gone, but the glow of the display seemed dimmer now, almost tired. That's when I heard my own voice. It was soft, cracked, but unmistakably mine. It came from a radio, repeating one word, over and over, "Sheriff." I stepped back so fast I hit the table behind me. The sound cut off, but the echo of it lingered inside me. I didn't know what scared me more, the voice itself or the way it sounded like I was talking in my sleep. I stayed still for what felt like hours, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. The air began to settle again, heavy and damp. I wiped sweat from my forehead, though I couldn't tell when I'd started sweating. When I finally stepped outside, the night was colder than before. The trees barely moved, but the wires above me still hummed, like they were carrying the sound of my heartbeat. As I walked toward the cruiser, I couldn't help but look back at the tower one more time. The lights along the frame flickered faintly, old emergency beacons that shouldn't even have power. I told myself it was just residual current, but deep down I knew better, because when I turned the key in the ignition, the radio in my cruiser crackled to life. No station, no signal, just a faint hum of static, and underneath it, almost buried, I could hear it again. The same whisper, the same voice. "Help us." This time, though, I think it said it in my voice. The fog rolled in sometime after midnight. Thick, heavy, like a living thing. I come back to the tower again. I don't even remember deciding to. I just found myself there, like something inside me had been tugging on a string, pulling me toward it, toward that damn radio. The air was damp, colder than usual, and the gravel under my boots was slick with dew. The world felt muffled. No crickets, no wind, just the sound of my footsteps disappearing into the mist. The tower's outline was barely visible through the fog, just a tall, skeletal shadow reaching into nothing. My flashlight beam couldn't cut more than a few feet ahead before it got swallowed whole. It was like walking through milk. When I reached the shack, the door was open. I knew I'd locked it before. I always do. But there it was, creaking gently on its hinges, like it had been waiting for me. Inside, the air was stale and still. The radio was off this time. Completely dark. That should have been a relief. But it wasn't. The silence in the room had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It felt crowded, like the quiet itself was thick with something unseen. I could almost hear the weight of it pressing against my eardrums. I told myself I'd just do a quick sweep and leave. Maybe the fog had gotten into the power lines. Maybe it shorted something. Rational thoughts. That's how I've always handled fear. Reason it down until it fits in a box. But reason didn't fit here. When I turned toward the door, I noticed light spilling through the fog outside. Not from the tower. Not from my cruiser. It was softer, flickering, moving. I stepped out, squinting through the haze. The light came from somewhere near the base of the tower. A faint, pale glow like lanterns being carried through the mist. For a second, I thought it might be kids. Maybe someone trespassing. But the way the lights moved, slow, deliberate, it didn't look human. I called out, "Hello? Sheriff's Department." My voice barely carried 10 feet before the fog swallowed it. No answer. The lights kept drifting. There were 3 of them now, maybe 4, close together, shifting in and out of view like they were circling the tower. I took a few steps forward, my hand resting on the radio clipped to my shoulder. This is private property. I called again. You need to show yourselves. Silence. Then one of the lights stopped moving. It just hung there in the fog, steady, like it had turned to face me. I couldn't see anyone holding it. Couldn't see anything at all. Just that dim, floating glow. The others stopped too, one by one. I felt something crawl up my spine. My breathing sounded too loud in my ears. I took another step, then another, until I was close enough to see faint outlines. Figures, tall, still, standing in the fog just beyond the fence line, their edges blurred, as if the mist itself was shaping them. I could see the vague curve of shoulders, the slope of heads, but no faces, no detail, just a suggestion of people. The glow came from somewhere behind them, bleeding through their shapes, making them look hollow. I gripped my flashlight tighter and shined it directly at them. The beam hit the fog, scattering light everywhere, but the figures didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't do anything. I said, "Who's out there?" Nothing, not a sound. Even the fog seemed to stop moving for a second. Then, from somewhere behind the figures, came a low hum, faint at first, almost easy to miss. But it grew, rising in pitch until I recognized it. The same tone the radio used to make before a signal came through. That soft electrical pulse, steady and rhythmic. I turned back toward the shack. The radio was glowing again, but I hadn't touched it. I looked back at the fog. The figures hadn't moved, but something about their shape had changed. Taller now, sharper. One of them tilted its head, just slightly, and I felt every hair on my arm stand up. My mouth went dry. "Stay where you are." I shouted. I said stay. And then, before I could finish, the lights blinked out. All at once. The fog swallowed everything. The figures, the glow, the shapes, gone. Like they'd never been there. I was left alone in the dark. The silence returned, thicker than before. Then, from inside the shack, the radio crackled. My stomach dropped. I turned slowly, half expecting to see someone standing in the doorway. Nothing, just a faint green glow from inside. I stepped closer, each footstep echoing too loud against the wet ground. The fog swirled around my legs like smoke. My flashlight flickered once, then twice, before dying completely. Now it was just me, the fog, and that pale light coming from the radio. When I reached the doorway, I froze. The radio was no longer on the desk. It was on the floor, right in the center of the room. I didn't remember moving it. The static had returned, faint but steady, a sound that should have been comforting. But underneath it, I could hear something else, whispering again, faint, broken, like breath over glass. I crouched down slowly. The whispers weren't coming from the speaker. They were inside the static, buried deep. I leaned closer, trying to make out a word, anything. That's when I realized the static wasn't random. It had a rhythm, a pattern, almost like Morse code, but too irregular. It pulsed in time with something else. My heart, and then I heard the first word. It was my name. Soft, drawn out, like it was being said through teeth. I stood up fast, kicking the chair behind me. The sound of it crashing echoed in the small space, and for a moment, everything stopped. Then outside, something moved. A slow shuffle in the gravel. Then another. I turned off the radio instinctively, plunging the shack into darkness. The only light left came from the fog outside, a dull gray glow that made the doorway look like a hole in the world. The shuffling came closer. 2, maybe 3 sets of footsteps, moving slow, deliberate. I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Identify yourselves." No answer. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them there. The air changed, pressing down on me. It felt like the fog itself was breathing. I took one step forward, my hand hovering near my holster. The silence was unbearable. Then, just as I was about to speak again, a sound broke through it, soft, almost fragile. Tapping. A single knuckle against the metal door frame. Once, twice, 3 times. I wanted to move. I wanted to do anything, but my body refused. My throat locked up. After the 3rd tap, everything went quiet again, and then out of nowhere a deep, low voice spoke, barely audible, muffled by fog. Why did you come back? I couldn't see anyone. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. I backed up, bumping into the desk. My flashlight rolled off the edge and hit the floor with a dull thud. I swallowed hard. My voice came out shaky. Who's there? Silence. The fog outside pulsed faintly, like it was breathing light. I could see faint shapes again, those same figures, standing still beyond the doorway, and one of them moved. It leaned forward, slow, unnatural, its outline bent, like the fog itself was folding in on me. I felt cold air brush against my face, even though it hadn't stepped inside. Then the whisper came again, closer this time, right beside my ear. Listen. I stumbled back, hit the wall. My flashlight flickered once before dying completely. And when the light went out, the whisper didn't stop. It just moved inside. I don't remember losing consciousness. 1 second, there was fog and whispering and that awful stillness pressing against me. And the next, I was on the floor. The air was thick, damp. My flashlight was dead, but faint light leaked through the cracks in the door. I sat up slowly, every muscle aching, head pounding like I'd been underwater too long. The fog outside was brighter now, almost white. It took me a moment to remember where I was. The tower, the shack, the radio, and then it all came back in a rush. The voices, the tapping, that last whisper that seemed to slip straight into my ear. I stood up on shaky legs. The room felt different, heavier. The walls seemed closer. The smell of dust and metal had turned sour, almost like something burning. The radio was dark again, but the air around it felt charged, like it had been running hot for hours. I crouched beside it, reached out and hesitated. The memory of that warmth under my hand, the pulse, made my stomach twist. But I had to know. I touched it, cold, completely dead. Still, the silence around it didn't feel natural. It had weight. I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears, the faint thud of my heartbeat against that emptiness. I backed away and looked around. My own footprints in the dust from earlier were still there, but next to them were others, faint, long leading from the door to the back of the shack. I froze. My mouth went dry. Someone had been in here, or was still here. I followed the prints slowly, my hand on my holster, even though I wasn't sure what good it would do. The prints ended near the back wall. Nothing there but a few old shelves and a stack of boxes covered in grime. I lifted one box. Empty. Lifted another. Also empty. When I reached the last one, I heard it again. A whisper. This time clear. Soft. Behind you. I spun around, heart slamming against my ribs. But there was no one. Just a radio. Sitting quietly in the corner. I stood there shaking for what felt like a full minute before I realized I'd started to laugh. A dry, broken sound that didn't even feel like mine. This was madness. I was losing it. I had to get out. I stepped outside into the fog. It was thicker now, dense as smoke. I couldn't see the tower at all. Only the faint red light blinking somewhere high above, barely visible through the haze. The world felt smaller, like the fog had eaten the land around me. Every direction looked the same, gray and endless. I called out, my voice hoarse. If anyone's out here, identify yourself. Nothing, only the echo of my own voice fading into the fog. I started walking, counting my steps, try to keep track of where the shack was. 10 steps out, 20. The silence was absolute, the kind of silence that makes your thoughts sound too loud. Then footsteps, not mine. Soft, deliberate, circling just beyond sight. I froze. The sound stopped too. I turned slowly, scanning the fog. I could feel eyes on me, watching, studying. Who's there? I called. My voice cracked on the last word. No answer, but something moved. Just a flicker in the mist. A darker shape shifting, too tall to be human. Then another, and another. They were all around me. Shapes forming and dissolving in the fog. Not solid, not entirely real, but close enough that my instincts screamed run. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, but the fog closed in tighter, swallowing the way back. I could feel the air vibrate, faintly humming, That same low electrical tone from before. And then the whispering began again. Dozens of voices now. Layered, tangled. Some faint and distant. Others right beside me. I couldn't make out words at first. Just the sound of breathing, sobbing, the shuffle of feet. But then, in the chaos, a single phrase began to rise. You shouldn't have come back. Over and over. From everywhere. From inside the fog. I turned and ran. The ground felt soft, like it was shifting under me. Every direction looked the same. I could barely breathe. The fog was thick as water, sticking to my skin, clinging to my face. I thought I saw the outline of the shack ahead, but when I reached it, the door was gone. Just metal walls stretching higher than before. My knees hit the ground. My lungs burned. The whispers had grown louder. So loud they felt physical, brushing against my ears, my neck. Listen. Help us. Stay. I covered my ears, but it didn't stop. The voices weren't coming from outside anymore. They were inside my head. I don't know how long I stayed like that, kneeling in the fog, waiting for the world to make sense again. When the noise finally began to fade, I realized I was back in front of the shack. The door was open, and the radio was on. I could hear it. Soft static, just like before, my own voice breathing somewhere underneath. I stepped inside slowly, almost afraid of what I'd find. The radio was glowing faintly. The room smelled of ozone again, sharp and metallic. My reflection stared back at me in the glass panel above the desk. I looked older, hollow. Then, faintly through the speaker, I heard a voice. It was me, Sheriff Carter. Copy that. Anyone there? My stomach turned. That was my call sign. My exact voice. The one I use when checking in with dispatch. But I wasn't speaking. The voice continued, calm and tired. This is Carter at the East Tower. I'm alone out here, requesting backup. The sound of static, then a faint reply. So faint I could barely catch it. Copy that, Carter. Hold position. Except I knew that voice. It was mine too. I stood frozen, staring at the radio as both voices, mine, kept talking, looping through the same conversation over and over. My mind tried to make sense of it. Some kind of interference, maybe an old transmission bleeding through. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. These weren't recordings. They were happening. Now, I reached for the radio, my hands trembling. Stop. I whispered, please stop. The voices didn't. They kept talking, calm and steady, like I wasn't even there. Then the tone shifted. Quieter now. The other version of me sounded scared. There's someone outside the shack, it said. My chest tightened. The voice repeated it, slower. There's someone outside. And then silence. I turned toward the doorway. The fog had crept inside again, pooling at my feet. Through it, I saw movement. A shadow. Tall. Still. Standing just beyond the threshold. I stepped back. My breath came fast and shallow. Stay back, I said, though my voice broke halfway through. The shadow didn't move. It just tilted its head, exactly the way that thing had done before. I reached for my gun, but my hand wouldn't close around the grip. My fingers were numb. The shadow stepped forward, one slow, deliberate motion, and then the radio spoke again. Sheriff Carter. My name, in my voice. I turned back to look at it, and froze. My reflection in the glass wasn't matching me anymore. It was standing still, eyes wide, mouth open slightly, its head tilted to the side, the same way the figure in the fog had. The glow from the radio flared brighter. My reflection began to move closer, pressing against the inside of the glass like it wanted out, and I heard it whisper, clear as day, you were never alone. Something cold touched my shoulder. I spun around. Nothing there, but the air had changed. Heavier now. I could feel movement behind me. Though the room looked empty, the shadows seemed deeper, like they were breathing. I stumbled back against the desk. The radio hissed louder, static rising until it filled the whole shack. My voice was still there, desperate now, shouting for help. This is Carter. I need backup. I need. The transmission cut off mid-sentence. The static softened again, and then Through the hiss, the voice that came next wasn't mine anymore. It was a whisper, low, wet, too close. Help me. The floor vibrated beneath my boots. The walls groaned, metal bending under pressure. I could hear faint tapping again. Fingers, nails, something scraping along the inside of the shack. I yelled, "Stop! Stop it!" The tapping stopped, and then, in the stillness, a single phrase came through the speaker, sharp and quiet. "You already did." The glow of the radio flickered once, twice, then it dimmed. I don't remember much after that. Just the feeling of the floor giving way beneath me, the world folding into static and darkness. The last thing I heard before everything went black was my own voice, faint and distant, calling out from the radio. "Sheriff Carter, copy, do you hear me?" And somewhere, buried inside that static, something answered, not in words, just in breathing, slow, steady, human. It was one of those nights that feels heavier than it should. You know the kind, when the rain finally stops, but the air still smells like it's waiting for another storm. I was out on patrol, just me and the cruiser, driving down County Road 6. It's one of those long, lonely stretches that run through the lowlands, flat, quiet, and lined with ditches deep enough to swallow a car. After 3 days of nonstop rain, those ditches had turned into rivers. The water shimmered under the moonlight, broken only by the ripples of frogs or drifting branches. The radio was dead quiet. No calls, no chatter from dispatch. Just the hum of static that came and went, like the air itself was breathing. I remember tapping my fingers on the wheel, trying to stay awake. It was close to midnight, and I'd been out since dusk. The town had taken a beating from the storm. Flooded basements, down lines, a few missing pets. Nothing out of the ordinary for that time of year, but still something about that night felt wrong. It was the reflections. I noticed them first. The puddles on the road were glassy and still, but they didn't seem to reflect what they should. The trees looked darker, taller in the water. Their shapes didn't match the ones lining the road. When my headlights passed over them, the reflections flickered, not with the movement of light, but like they were reacting to something else. At first, I thought I was just tired. Eyes playing tricks. Sleep deprivation can do that, but when I slowed down to get a better look, I realized it wasn't my eyes. The reflection of my cruiser. It was there, clear as day, but in the driver's seat of that reflection, there was no one, just an empty car gliding through the water. I blinked hard, looked again, and it was gone. Just my reflection, normal now. I told myself to get a grip. Rain messes with visibility. The road was slick, and the water could distort anything. I pushed on, keeping the headlights low and steady. But the farther I drove, the stranger it got. The road dipped lower, the air thicker, and the puddles grew wider until they were more like ponds. Every few hundred feet, I'd see flashes of movement in the water. Silhouettes walking across it, faint and distant, like shadows trapped under the surface. I'd hit the brakes, shine my light, and the road would be empty again. Only the ripples remained, spreading slowly across the black water. I tried calling it in, but the radio was acting up. Static, then a faint voice, too low to make out. I turned the dial, tried to raise dispatch again. "This is Carter," I said. "I'm on County 6, just past mile marker 12. You got me?" Nothing, just the sound of rain dripping off the roof of the cruiser. I turned the volume down and kept driving. When you've been doing this job long enough, you learn to live with the quiet. But this was different. It wasn't just silence. It was listening silence, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something. Then I saw the car, a dark sedan, half in the ditch, its back end sticking out into the road. Headlights off, doors closed, no movement inside. I pulled over, put the cruiser in park, and stepped out. The air was cold, the kind that bites through your jacket and settles in your bones. I could hear water trickling down into the ditch, slow and steady. I approached the car carefully, flashlight cutting through the mist. The ground squelched under my boots. "County Sheriff." I called out, "Anyone in there?" No response. I shone the light through the window. The front seats were empty, but the back seat, something moved. Just a flicker. like a person leaning forward then disappearing again. "Hello," I said, tapping on the glass. "You need help?" The window fogged up. I thought maybe it was my breath at first, but I was standing too far back. The fog spread across the glass in a slow, spiraling pattern, like something was pressing its face right against the inside. My stomach dropped. I yanked the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. That's when I noticed the water around the car. It was rising, slow but steady. The ditch must have been overflowing from the rain runoff, but the rate didn't make sense. It was climbing up the tires, swallowing the lower half of the doors. I stepped back toward the cruiser to radio for backup, but the air shifted. A strange vibration, deep and low, almost like a hum under my feet. The puddles around me began to ripple outward, every one of them, perfect little circles expanding from invisible drops. And then, in the reflection of the flooded road, I saw it again, the car, the one half in the ditch. But this time, in the reflection, the doors were open, and there was a man standing beside it. I couldn't see his face, just his outline in the water, tall, thin, shoulders slumped like he was exhausted. He wasn't standing on the road. He was standing in the water's reflection, looking up at me through the surface. I blinked. He was gone. I turned my flashlight toward the ditch. Empty. The car was still there, doors still closed. That's when the radio crackled to life. It was faint, buried in static, but I heard it. "Carter, do you read?" I grabbed the mic. "Yeah, I read you. I've got a vehicle off the road near marker 12. Possible occupant inside, but I can't make contact. Requesting." Static drowned me out. Then, beneath it, a sound that made my blood run cold. Gurgling, like someone trying to talk underwater. Then a voice, wet and distant. "Don't go near the water." I froze. "Who is this?" I asked. "Identify yourself." Nothing. Just static again. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I took a step back toward the cruiser when I heard a soft splash behind me, the kind of sound a shoe makes when it breaks the surface of a puddle. I turned slowly. The reflection of the road was rippling again, though the air was completely still, and in it I saw my own reflection standing there, but it wasn't matching me. I raised my flashlight, and the reflection didn't. It just stared back, head tilted slightly to the side. I felt something pull tight in my chest, like my body knew before my mind did that what I was looking at wasn't me. Then, without warning, the reflection took a step forward. The ripples spread, and for a split second, I swear I saw a second pair of eyes beneath the surface, watching me from under the water. That was enough. I backed away, climbed into the cruiser, slammed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the keys in the ignition. The headlights flicked on. The water-covered road gleamed ahead like a sheet of glass. And then something in the beams moved. A shape, standing dead center on the road about 20 feet ahead. Human. Still, the figure's outline shimmered in the wet reflection, but in the reflection it was closer. Too close. I gripped the wheel and blinked once. The figure was gone, but its reflection was still there. I didn't think. I just hit the gas. The cruiser tore forward, spraying water in all directions. When I passed over the spot, there was nothing. No one on the road, no shape in the mirror. But the radio was still on. And through the static, I heard my own voice. "This is Sheriff Carter. I'm on County 6. The road's flooding." I froze. That wasn't me talking. That was my voice. But I hadn't said those words. The voice on the radio continued, breathless. "There's something in the water." Then silence. The hum returned, low and steady, vibrating through the steering wheel. I drove straight back to town, without looking back once. I didn't even stop to check the road marker or file a proper report. I just needed to be somewhere dry, somewhere real. When I parked outside the station, the rain started again. I sat there in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the reflections in the puddles forming around the tires. They looked normal this time. Still, perfectly still. But even now, when I think back to that night, I can't shake one thought. If reflections are supposed to show what's real, then what exactly was I seeing? Because sometimes when the road floods again after a storm. I still hear it, that faint, gurgling voice whispering from the static. Don't go near the water. After that night on County 6, I told myself I wouldn't go back. But I did, not right away. A few nights passed, maybe a week. Enough time for the roads to dry, for the reflections to look like normal puddles again. But something about that stretch of road kept pulling at me, like unfinished business whispering in the back of my mind. I tried to ignore it, worked my shifts, did the usual rounds through town. But every time I passed a junction that led out toward County 6, I'd slow down just a little. My headlights would catch the road sign, bent and half-rusted, and my stomach would tighten. Then one night, dispatch sent me out that way for real. A truck had been reported stalled in the fog. Could be a breakdown. They said, guy might need help getting out. I didn't argue. I just grabbed my hat, radio, and keys. Told myself it was just another call. But I knew better. When I got out there, the fog was thick again. Not rain fog. Not mist. It was heavier, like it was made of something more than air. My headlights could barely cut through 10 feet of it. The road was slick, wet again somehow, even though there hadn't been any rain all week. It smelled like damp earth and old metal. The radio crackled as I drove. Bits of voices came through, overlapping, fading in and out. I thought maybe it was dispatch or another unit, but every time I answered, it went quiet again. Eventually, I reached a stretch near Marker 12, the same spot where I'd seen that car before. And there it was again, a truck this time, big, older model, parked diagonally across the road like it had skidded and stopped. Its headlights were still on, but the beams were dim, flickering. I slowed the cruiser and rolled to a stop a few yards back. The truck's engine wasn't running. No movement inside. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the fog. The air was so thick it clung to my clothes, leaving beads of water on my sleeves. The sound of my boots against the wet road felt too loud, like I was disturbing something that had been still for too long. Sheriff's Department. I called out, "You all right in there?" No answer. I walked up to the truck side. The door was half open, creaking in the wind that wasn't really there. The cab was empty, just an old thermos, a cap on the seat, and a layer of mud on the floorboard. But the thing that caught my attention was the smell. Wet, musty, like pond water and rust. It clung to the air around the truck, thick and sour. I leaned in closer, shining my light across the dash. The ignition key was still there, but when I reached for it, the engine coughed to life. Just like that. No one in the driver's seat. No movement. Just the engine roaring like someone had turned it from the inside. I stumbled back, hand on my holster. The headlights flared, flooding the fog in blinding white. Then, before I could even process what I was seeing, the truck started moving, slowly, rolling forward down the road. I shouted, "Hey, stop," and jogged after it. My boots splashed through puddles that hadn't been there seconds ago. But the truck didn't stop. It picked up speed, the red taillights glowing faintly through the fog. The sound of its tires sloshing through water echoed in the air, deep, heavy, and then silence. The lights vanished. The engine cut out. I ran a few steps more, heart pounding, flashlight beam cutting through the mist, but there was nothing, just empty road. No truck. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, listening. The only sound was my own breathing. Then I heard it, faintly, behind me, the rumble of an engine. I turned. The truck was back, parked behind my cruiser, facing the opposite direction. Its headlights were off now. I didn't hear it turn around. Didn't hear tires. Didn't hear an engine move through gravel. It was just there. I walked toward it, slower this time. Every instinct told me to leave it alone, call it in, let someone else handle it. But I couldn't. Something about it felt personal now, like it was showing itself to me. I got close enough to touch the hood. It was cold. No warmth. No vibration from a running engine. I crouched down to check the tires. Deep mud treads pressed into the road. They led behind the truck, stretching back into the fog. I followed them. For about 20 feet, the track stayed clear, cutting to the thin layer of water on the asphalt. Then, halfway down the road, they stopped. Just stopped. The mud marks ended abruptly, fading into perfectly smooth pavement. No sign of a turnoff. No sign of a U-turn. It was as if the truck had driven straight into the air and vanished. I felt a drop of water hit my cheek. Looked up. The fog above me shimmered, faintly moving, like there was something swimming in it. Then my radio buzzed. Carter. The voice was quiet, slow, distant. This is Carter. I said, who is this? A pause. Then my own voice came through, flat, drained, like it had been recorded underwater. You shouldn't follow it. The static hissed. I dropped the mic, eyes darting back toward the truck. The cab door was closed now. I hadn't touched it. I stepped back, scanning the road. The fog had thickened so much I could barely see my own cruiser. Everything looked distorted, bent by the mist and the reflections on the wet surface. And then I noticed something new. Shapes in the puddles. Not my reflection, not the trucks. Other shapes. People. Dozens of them. Faint and dark. Standing still beneath the surface of the water. Their outlines rippled when I moved. But they didn't vanish. They just stood there, heads tilted, arms hanging by their sides. I whispered, what the hell? Then the truck's horn blared. One long, low note that shattered the silence. I jumped, spinning around. The headlights were on again, flooding the fog with light, so bright it hurt my eyes. And there, just for a second, I saw someone in the driver's seat. A man, soaking wet, hands on the wheel. But when I blinked, he was gone. The lights cut out, leaving me blind in the fog. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping on the uneven road. My flashlight flickered. I hit it against my palm until it steadied. When the beam came back on, the truck was gone again. No engine noise. No taillights. Just empty road. I turned toward my cruiser and froze. Across the hood, there were muddy handprints, dozens of them, pressed into metal like someone had dragged their wet hands over it. They dripped, leaving dark streaks down the sides. I wiped one with my glove. It smeared, thick and real, but when I looked down, there were no footprints, just smooth, wet pavement. I don't remember getting back in the car. I just remember slamming the door, locking it, and gripping the steering wheel so tight my hands hurt. The radio buzzed again. Carter, the voice said. Same voice as before. My voice. You saw it this time. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The fog around the cruiser pulsed faintly, glowing from the headlights. I thought I saw something move through it. Tall, slow shapes drifting along the ditches. And then the truck appeared again, right in front of me, facing me. No sound, no engine. Just there. Its headlights flared to life, burning through the fog. I could barely see anything but white. The air vibrated with that same deep hum I'd heard before, like a current running through the road. Then the radio whispered one last thing. They're not gone there below. And the truck vanished. The light blinked out like a switch had been flipped. When my eyes adjusted, the road was empty again. But the muddy tire tracks were back, leading toward me this time. I sat there until dawn, watching those tracks fade, until there was nothing left, not even the smell of mud, just the same still water reflecting the sky. And sometimes when I drive that stretch again after a storm, I still see tire marks forming in the wet road, always leading somewhere, always stopping halfway, like something still out there, driving between worlds that shouldn't touch. And every time I pass them, I swear I hear the faint rumble of that truck fading into the fog, just waiting to come back. I remember the first thing that hit me that night wasn't the sound. It was the silence, that kind of deep, heavy quiet that falls after rain, when the world feels drowned, like even the air is too thick to move through. The storm had stopped maybe an hour ago, but the road still looked like a long strip of black glass. My cruiser's headlights cut across the puddles, and every reflection shimmered just a little too long after I passed. I had that feeling again, the one I can't quite name. Something about this stretch of road always felt wrong, like it shouldn't exist after midnight. The radio was still whispering faint static, the kind that sits just at the edge of words. I tried turning it off, but the static didn't stop. I told myself it was just bleed over from one of the nearby stations. But deep down, I knew better. That's when the call came in. A woman's voice, broken, wet and gasping. "Help me, please." I froze. My hand hovered over the receiver. "Ma'am, this is Sheriff Holt. I've got your call. What's your location?" She coughed hard. It sounded muffled, like she was speaking through water. "I can't breathe. Please, it's dark. It's filling up." I straightened in my seat, heart thudding. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Tell me where you are. What do you see around you?" Silence, then a faint gurgle, and a single strained word. "Road." The dispatcher line pinged the location automatically. GPS from the caller's signal. It blinked on my onboard screen, flashing coordinates that sent a chill crawling up my spine. It wasn't miles away. It wasn't across the county. It was right in front of me. My cruiser headlights were already hitting the spot. Empty road, shimmering puddles, not a single car. I pulled the shoulder, tires splashing through shallow water, and stepped out. The rain smell was still strong, wet earth, oil, and ozone. I pressed the radio to my mouth. "Dispatch! I've got a call coming from Route 19, just past a bend near Miller's Creek. Location's right in front of me, but there's no vehicle. Can you confirm?" A pause. Then a confused voice crackled back. 10-4, Sheriff. We see the same ping. Line still open. Caller hasn't disconnected. I turned a slow circle, scanning the road. Nothing but my reflection in the puddles. And yet, I could hear her, faintly through the speaker. "Please, it's cold. I can't find the door." The sound was wrong. It wasn't coming through the radio speaker anymore. It was coming from the road, from the puddle right at my feet. I crouched, shining my flashlight on it, and my stomach turned. The reflection didn't match. My boots were planted at the edge of the water, but in the reflection, they weren't mine. Someone else's smaller, bare feet kicking, thrashing under a shimmer of moving light. The water rippled, and for a split second I thought I saw a face, pale, wide-eyed, looking up to the reflection like it was glass. Then it was gone. I took a step back. My pulse hammered in my ears. "Ma'am, listen to me," I said, even though I didn't know where to speak. "Can you hear me? Can you tell me your name?" Her reply came slower this time, like she was fading. "It's Anna." That name hit me hard. Anna. It had been years, but I remembered that name from an old report. A woman who drowned out near Miller's Creek after a bridge collapse. The body had never been recovered. I'd been new to the department back then. Her husband used to come by the station every week, just sitting outside, waiting for someone to tell him they'd found her. I felt a cold wind rise up from nowhere, tugging at my jacket. The puddles began to ripple again, though the air was perfectly still. "Anna, I'm here. I'm right where the call's coming from. What do you see?" Her breathing quickened through the static. "I see lights. They're above me. I can't get out. It's filling up." "Stay with me. You're not alone." Her next words chilled me. "You're right here." I froze, because her voice didn't come from the radio anymore. It came from right behind me. I turned fast, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam cut through the fog, nothing but the soaked road and a long, empty stretch of night. But then I saw it, a shape kneeling in the middle of the road, about 50 feet ahead. A woman, hair hanging down, dripping wet. Her clothes clung to her body like she'd just crawled out of a river. I shouted, "Ma'am, don't move. I'm here to help you." But she didn't move, didn't even look up, just stayed there, still and quiet, like she was listening to something below her. I started walking toward her, boots splashing in the puddles. But every step I took, the puddle rippled backward, like my movement was happening in reverse. When I was about 10 feet away, I stopped. She was gone. The puddle where she'd been kneeling stretched across the road, and in the reflection, I swear to God, I could see her still there, trapped under the surface, mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear. And then the radio hissed again. "Sheriff Holt." The dispatcher said quietly, "The call just cut out. Signal's gone. You still have eyes on the subject." I couldn't speak. My throat felt locked. When I finally managed a breath, I said, "Negative. There's no one here." I turned to walk back to my cruiser, but something caught my eye. In the reflection, mine didn't move. I froze mid-step. Looked down. The man staring back at me from the puddle was still. His head tilted up slowly, and I saw his lips move. "You didn't save her." I stumbled back, nearly losing my balance. The reflection didn't follow. It just stood there, staring up at me through the water, like it was waiting for me to admit something. And maybe I knew what. Years ago, during a flood near that same creek, a patrol car had gone off the bridge. I'd been the first responder. 2 victims. Only one made it out. The woman who didn't. Her name was Anna, the same name that had just called me. I slammed the cruiser door and locked it, sitting in silence, shaking. The puddles outside shimmer with their own dim light, each one reflecting something that wasn't there. Figures, headlights, ripples that moved when the air was still. Then, one last time, the radio came to life. "Sheriff Holt, you didn't save me." Her voice was so close it might have been from the seat beside me. The cruiser's headlights flickered once, and for the briefest moment, in the reflection of the windshield, I saw her face press against the glass. Eyes open, mouth full of water, smiling. Then she was gone. The road was empty again. But the puddles stayed dark, darker than the night around them, like they were waiting for someone else to step too close. And I drove. I didn't stop until the rain started again, because it's easier to hear the rain than the voices that come with the silence after. I've been a sheriff in this county for 20 years, long enough to know that quiet nights are never really quiet. That night, the call came in a little after 1. Dispatch said the manager of the Silver Pines Motel had reported strange noises, whispering through the vents, footsteps on the roof, things like that. But when they tried calling back for details, the line went dead. I almost ignored it. Probably a drunk guest or a busted air duct. But something about the silence after that call stuck with me. So I grabbed my jacket radio and flashlight and drove out there myself. The motel sat about 15 miles outside town, right where the woods met the old highway. It had that washed-out, tired look, flickering neon sign, gravel crunching under the tires. The kind of place that used to be busy in the 60s, but now mostly hosted truckers and lost tourists. When I pulled in, the front office light was still on, but there were no cars in the lot. None. That was the first thing that bothered me. The second was the smell. The air was too clean. No damp asphalt, no motor oil, no dust. It felt sterilized. Somehow, I stepped out, the crunch of my boots echoing louder than it should have. The wind wasn't blowing, yet the flag near the office fluttered like something was moving through it. I remember thinking maybe the HVAC unit was running strong, but there was no hum, no sound at all, just a lonely squeak of the motel sign turning in the breeze. Inside the lobby, the lights were on, every bulb perfect. The place was spotless. Polish counter, organized brochures, coffee machine wiped down. It looked like a set, not a real place. "Hello," I called out, tapping the counter. "Sheriff's Department." No answer. There was a bell on the desk. I pressed it once. The sharp ding echoed through the room and bounced off the walls like the sound didn't know where to go. Behind the counter was a little wooden cabinet with the old-style room keys, brass tags hanging neatly in rows. Every key was in its place except one. Room 9. I wrote that down in my notebook and circled it. There was also a guest book on the counter. I flipped it open, expecting to see check-ins and signatures, maybe a date, but the pages were blank. Every single one. Still, the pen next to it had fresh ink on the tip. That's when I started feeling watched. Not seen, watched, like something was standing just behind the doorway, breathing slow, waiting to see what I'd do next. I turned around fast, but there was nothing there, just the faint hum of the vending machine by the far wall, glowing in the corner like it didn't belong. I walked behind the counter and called out again. "Anybody here? Manager? This is the sheriff's department." No response. The door behind the counter led to a narrow hallway. I pushed it open, the hinges moving too smoothly, like they'd just been oiled. Behind it was a small office, a cot, and a TV playing static. The power light blinked red, but the picture was just snow. A notebook lay open on the desk. At first, it looked empty too, but when I tilted my flashlight just right, I saw faint indentations in the paper. Someone had written on the page above it. I rubbed the side of my pencil across the sheet, just like they teach you in the academy. The words slowly appeared. Don't check anyone in after midnight. That's all it said. I stared at it for a long moment, then closed the book and stepped back into the lobby. My radio crackled once, just static, then went silent again. I decided to check room 9. The hallway leading to the rooms was outside, a long strip of faded blue doors under a line of buzzing fluorescent lights. The night air felt heavy now, thick, almost humid. My boots echoed on the concrete, but every step sounded offbeat, like someone else was walking just a half second behind me. Room 9 was at the end. The number on the door was polished so clean I could see my reflection in it, but my face looked wrong. The light above the door flickered, and for a second, I swear I saw my reflection still staring at me even after I moved. I brushed it off. Tired eyes. Been up too long. The door was unlocked. Inside, the room was the same as the lobby. Spotless. Bed made. Remote on the nightstand. Curtains drawn perfectly straight. No signs of struggle. No guests. Nothing. Except the air. It was freezing. I could see my breath when I exhaled. I checked the thermostat. It was turned off. I looked around again. That's when I noticed something strange. The Bible in the nightstand drawer. Normally, it's right side up, pages facing you. But this one was upside down, like someone had put it back in a hurry. Underneath it was a small, crumpled piece of paper. It said, "If you hear them, don't answer." That's when I heard a soft knock. Not on the door, but inside the wall. 3 taps. Slow. I froze. My hand went to my holster, but I didn't draw. I pressed my ear to the wall, the one that should have connected to room 10. It was dead silent. Then, faintly, I heard whispering, like voices trapped deep inside the plaster. Too soft to make out, too close to be imagination. "Hello," I said quietly. The whispering stopped. Then something on the other side dragged across the wall, long, scraping, like fingernails or metal. The sound crawled down toward the floor and stopped behind the dresser. My flashlight flickered once, then went out. When it came back, the mirror over the dresser looked fogged, like someone had just breathed on it from inside. And there was a word written in the condensation. "Stay." I backed away, pulling my radio from my shoulder. "Dispatch. This is Sheriff Dalton at Silver Pines Motel. Possible break-in. Send a unit to..." The radio crackled, then repeated my voice back to me, word for word. My hand went cold. I dropped the radio on the bed and backed toward the door. The moment I touched the handle, I heard another knock, this time from outside. 3 taps. Same rhythm. I pulled the door open fast. But the walkway was empty. The lights hummed overhead, and the air outside felt thick, still. Then I heard it again, not from outside the room, from the next one over. Room 10. I looked at the row of doors, all identical, all perfectly clean. And for the first time that night, I didn't want to open another one. But I'm a cop. You don't walk away from a noise when people might be hurt. So I stepped toward room 10. The door was slightly open, just an inch. The handle gleamed under the fluorescent light. I nudged it with my boot. The door creaked open. Inside, the room was gone. Not messy. Not vandalized. Just gone. No bed, no walls, no carpet. Only black. A hollow, endless dark. And faintly, far away, I heard my own voice whispering from inside. "Don't check anyone in after midnight." The door slammed shut by itself. I stumbled back, almost tripping over the curb. Every door along the row started to rattle, one by one, metal clanging like someone inside was trying to get out. Then, all at once, it stopped. Silence again. The next thing I remember, I was standing back in the lobby, breathing hard, my flashlight trembling in my hand. Everything looked exactly as it had before, neat, clean, quiet, like none of it had happened. But when I looked at the key rack again, room 9's tag was back in place. And this time, it was covered in fingerprints. I didn't sleep that night, not after what happened in room 9. By sunrise, I was still sitting in my cruiser outside the Silver Pines Motel, watching the neon sign flicker in the pale morning light. It was strange. During the day, the place almost looked normal, harmless even, But that didn't change what I'd seen. When the deputy arrived, I didn't tell him everything. I just said there was no sign of the manager and that I wanted the area cleared until further notice. He nodded, made a few calls, and left not long after. I stayed behind. I needed to see for myself if what I'd experienced was real, or if I was losing my mind. That morning, 3 people showed up at the motel gate. Each looked like they hadn't slept in days. The first was a trucker, big guy with gray stubble and sunken eyes. The second was a woman in her 40s, traveling with a little girl who couldn't have been older than 8. The third was a young man wearing a motel uniform. He said he was the night clerk, though I hadn't seen him anywhere last night. They all said the same thing. They'd had the same dream. They didn't know each other. They hadn't spoken before. But every one of them described it like they'd shared the same memory. They said they were walking through the motel hallway, hearing faint whispering through the walls. A woman's voice. She kept saying, "Don't open the door," but the doors wouldn't stay shut. Something on the other side kept pushing them open. When I asked which room, they all hesitated. Then the trucker said it first. Room 6. The number hit me like a nail to the spine. I'd been in this motel 100 times over the years. Room 6 was one of the older ones. The wallpaper peeling. The light always flickering no matter how many times you changed the bulb. I'd always hated that room. The young clerk said it used to be the owner's room, back before the place changed hands. I asked him when the last guest stayed there, and he said something that chilled me. No one's checked into room 6 in over 10 years. He didn't even look surprised saying it, just tired. I told the 3 of them to wait in the office while I checked it out. The little girl clung to her mother's hand, staring at me like she knew something I didn't. As I walked past, she whispered, "You shouldn't go in there." Her voice was small, shaky, but certain. I didn't answer her. I wish I had. The air in front of room 6 felt colder than the rest of the walkway. My hand shook a little as I reached for the handle. The brass number was faded, but I could still make out the outline of a handprint right beneath it. Too small to be mine. When the door creaked open, the smell hit me first. Not rot, not mold, something dry and old, like paper left too long in the sun. Inside, the room looked untouched. Bed made, curtains drawn, lamp still crooked like it always had been. Dust floated to the light like falling snow. But the strangest thing was the dresser. There was a leather-bound book sitting on top, a diary. I shouldn't have opened it, but something about it felt familiar. The cover was cracked and faded, the edges worn down like someone had carried it around for years. When I flipped the first page, I froze. The handwriting. It was mine, not similar, not close. Mine. The same loops, the same crooked letters, the same little ink blot I always make when I write too fast. I felt my chest tighten. My own name was written in the top corner of the page. Sheriff Daniel Dalton, 2007, 18 years ago. I don't remember ever owning a diary. Hell, I barely remember 2007, but the entries were there, pages of them. The first few looked like case notes, mentions of motel complaints, missing persons. Then the tone changed. I started reading aloud, trying to convince myself I was wrong. Day 3. The guests hear things I can't. They dream about doors. I think the rooms are wrong. The layout keeps changing. Day 6. I found my badge in the nightstand of room 9, but I'm still wearing it. Day 9. If I forget again, the word will remind me. Room 6 is where it began. I turned another page and felt my throat go dry. The ink on that one was smeared, like it had been written in a hurry. If you're reading this, you didn't leave. I slammed the book shut. My heartbeat filled my ears. The room felt smaller, suddenly, like the walls were breathing. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, this is Dalton. I need you to confirm something for me. Did I file any reports at the Silver Pines Motel back in 2007? Static. I repeated it louder. More static. Then, faintly, my own voice came through. If you're reading this, you didn't leave. The exact same words. I dropped the radio and stumbled backward until I hit the wall. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that diary, listening to the faint hum of the air vent. It sounded like whispering again, soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. When I finally worked up the nerve to pick the diary back up, something new had appeared on the next page. It wasn't ink. It was carved, scratched deep into the paper. Check the bathroom. My flashlight flickered as I turned toward the door. The handle was old, rusted, but it turned too easily. The smell got stronger when I opened it. Stronger, sharper, almost metallic. The light inside buzzed once, then steadied. There was a mirror above the sink, cracked through the middle. My reflection stared back at me, pale, exhausted, eyes sunken. But when I moved, the reflection didn't. It just smiled, slow, deliberate. Then, behind the fog on the glass, words began to appear like someone was breathing them onto the mirror from the other side. "Welcome back, Sheriff." I stumbled backward, my boot catching the corner of the bath mat. The diary slipped from my hand and landed open on the tile. The pages turned by themselves, stopping near the end, on a page I hadn't seen before. The date at the top read October 10th, 2025. Today's date. The entry was short, only one sentence. He found the diary in room 6. For a long time, I didn't move. My head was spinning. My mind told me this wasn't possible, that someone was playing a trick on me. But deep down, I knew the handwriting, the words, the way the sentences curved. It was all mine, and that meant I had been here before. I left the room shaking. The hallway felt different now. Longer, darker, like the light was struggling to keep up with me. When I reached the lobby, the 3 guests were gone. The office door hung open, the coffee machine still steaming. The child's doll sat on the counter, one glass I'm missing, staring straight at me. Behind it, the guest book lay open. There were names now, handwritten in the same looping script as the diary. Page after page of signatures, all in my handwriting. Dozens of them, and next to each one, the same note written in red ink. Checked in, never checked out. I don't remember walking out of there. I just remember standing by my cruiser, clutching the diary so hard my hands hurt. The air outside felt wrong, like I stepped out of one world and into another that only looked like mine. I called the station again. No answer, just my voice echoing back through static. That's when I looked down at the diary one last time. There was something new written at the very end. A single line. When the rooms start remembering you, it's already too late. I don't know how it ended up there. I swear it wasn't there before. But I know one thing for sure. Whoever Sheriff Dalton was back in 2007. I think he never left this place. And I think I'm starting to remember why. I don't remember leaving the motel after finding that diary. But somehow, by the next morning, I was sitting in my cruiser again, engine running, coffee gone cold, staring at that same flickering neon sign, Silver Pines Motel. The end buzzed in and out like it couldn't decide if it wanted to exist. I told myself I should drive away. Just leave it behind. Let someone else handle it. But every time I started the engine, I'd catch something in the rear view mirror. The motel, sitting there behind me, reflected in perfect stillness. And the longer I looked, the more I swore was waiting for me. So I went back inside. The front lobby smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner again, just like before. Everything neat, everything calm. The guest book still open on the counter, but there were new entries now. Different names, different handwriting. I flipped through the pages. H. Miller, Janice Lorne, David R., and at the bottom of the most recent page, scrawled like someone in a hurry, Daniel Dalton. My own name. I stared at it for a long time. The pen was still lying next to the book, the ink tip wet. I touched it, and a black smudge spread across my thumb. It was fresh. I looked up. Behind the counter, a wall of framed photographs lined the back wall. Old pictures, smiling guests, families on road trips, truckers giving thumbs up, the kind of photos you'd see in any roadside motel. But when I leaned closer, something was off. The faces weren't clear. At first, I thought it was dust or fading film, but when I rubbed the glass with my sleeve, the blur didn't wipe away. It moved. The longer I looked, the more the faces seemed to melt. The smiles faded first, then the eyes. The shapes dissolved until all that was left were outlines, shadows of people who used to exist. My stomach turned. I stepped back, blinking, but something caught my attention. In one of the pictures, a family of four, maybe from the 80s, one figure still had a face. The father. He was tall, clean-cut, wearing a sheriff's badge. It was me. You ever have a moment so impossible that your brain just stops trying to understand it? That's what it felt like. I pressed my hand to the glass, trying to steady myself. The reflection looking back at me wasn't my face anymore. It was younger, cleaner, the man in the photo. And as I watched, the man's face started to fade too. First his eyes, then his mouth, until all that remained was the badge. My badge. I turned around fast. For a second, I thought I saw people standing in the hallway, blurry shapes, just beyond the corner of my vision. But when I looked straight at them, they vanished, like they'd only existed in the edges of the light. The room went colder. That's when I noticed something new on the counter. A stack of photographs I hadn't seen before, wrapped in a rubber band. I hesitated, then pulled them free. Each photo showed a guest room, different angles, different times of day, some old, some recent. But what made my skin crawl wasn't what was in them. It was what wasn't. Every photo had a missing piece, a space, like someone had carefully erased a person from each one. A bed with the sheets folded back, a chair facing the mirror with no one sitting in it, a table with a coffee mug, but no hand holding it. The erasures weren't random. They were deliberate, precise. At the bottom of the last photo was a scrawled note. The ones who forget first disappear the fastest. I felt something twist in my gut. My mind flashed back to the guests, the trucker, the woman, the child, the clerk, their faces, but I couldn't remember them clearly anymore. I tried to picture the trucker's stubble, the woman's blue coat, the girl's eyes, but the more I tried, the more their details slipped away like fog. My head started to ache, my thoughts scattering. I opened the office door and shouted, "Hello? Anyone here?" Nothing, just silence. I walked back into the hallway. The motel felt different now, warmer somehow, but heavy. The walls seemed closer, the colors duller. Every door was slightly open, just enough for a shadow to slip through. Room 3, room 4, room 5. I stopped in front of room 6, the one with the diary. The door was shut tight now. I reached out and touched the handle. It was cold, damp, like metal left out in the rain. Then I saw something written across the door in faint chalk letters. They only fade if you remember them. I didn't know what that meant. My head was pounding. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep hold of the flashlight. I turned away, and that's when I saw her, the little girl, standing halfway down the hall, holding her doll. She was staring at me, her head tilted slightly to one side. Her face looked wrong somehow, soft around the edges, like the air was erasing her in real time. "Sweetheart," I said quietly. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She raised her hand and pointed toward the lobby. Then she was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just gone. I ran back to the office, breathing hard. The photos on the wall were changing right in front of me. Faces dissolving, names fading off plaques. The room seemed to breathe. Each flicker of the light made the air ripple like heat off pavement. I turned toward the guest book again. The names that had been there moments ago. Miller, Lauren, David. They were fading one by one until only a single name remained. Daniel Dalton. My name. Something snapped at me then. I grabbed the guest book and threw it across the room. The pages fluttered, catching air like wings before falling open near the fireplace. The last page had writing I hadn't seen before. Fresh ink, my handwriting. If you can see their faces, it means they're still here. I looked up at the wall again. Every photograph was blank now, just white paper and empty frames. Except one, the last frame on the far right. It showed the motel lobby, this very room. And standing behind the counter in the photo was me, not the me from years ago, the me now. Except I wasn't looking at the camera. I was looking over my shoulder. My breath caught in my throat. I turned slowly, terrified of what I'd see. But there was nothing there, just a vending machine humming quietly. The air still, too still. Then, from somewhere deep in the walls, came the sound of a camera shutter. Click. Once. Then silence. I turned back toward the photo. It had changed. Now I was looking straight into the camera. My face pale. Eyes wide. Like I just realized something terrible. And beneath the photo, written in smeared ink, were 3 new words. You'll fade too. I stared at that picture until my vision blurred. I reached up to touch my face, and for a second, I swear my hand passed through my own reflection in the glass. No warmth, no resistance, just cold air. That's when it hit me. Maybe the reason the faces fade isn't because they're gone. Maybe it's because they're still here, and the motel doesn't want anyone to remember them. I didn't sleep that night either. I don't think I could have, even if I'd tried. After the faces disappeared from the photos, I stayed in the lobby for hours, just sitting there under that buzzing fluorescent light. The clock above the counter said it was 2:13 a.m., but the second hand never moved. It just ticked over and over, stuck in the same spot. I remember thinking how strange it was, how everything in that place pretended to work. The lights, the air vents, even the sound of the clock. But if you really looked close, nothing was alive. I was the only one there. At least, that's what I told myself. Sometime after 3, I started hearing it. Soft, slow footsteps, coming from above me. At first, I thought maybe it was the wind, the roof settling, maybe an old pipe shifting. But no, these were deliberate, measured, like someone walking barefoot across the ceiling, one step at a time. I stood there in the middle of the lobby, listening. The steps moved back and forth, directly above my head, slow and heavy. Then they stopped right over me. I whispered, "Hello?" No answer. I waited a few seconds, then grabbed my flashlight. The sound started again, this time quicker, circling. I could almost feel the vibration through the ceiling tiles, like something was pacing just beyond reach. There's no second floor at Silver Pines. The roof is flat. I knew that. I'd seen it 100 times from the outside. But that didn't stop the footsteps. They went on for what felt like minutes. Slow, careful, pausing every few steps like they were listening too. Then silence. I don't know what possessed me to go outside. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that no one was up there. I grabbed my coat, pushed open the lobby door, and stepped into the cold. The air was dead still. The gravel crunched under my boots. I tilted the flashlight upward and swept it across the roofline. Nothing. No ladder, no signs of movement. The roof looked untouched, coated in a thin layer of frost that shimmered under the light. But as I turned back toward the door, I heard it again. A single step. This time not above me. Inside. The sound came from the hallway. That long, narrow strip of rooms where the air always felt wrong. The light in there flickered weakly, barely cutting through the dark. I called out, "Sheriff's Department. If someone's in here, make yourself known." No response. Just the hum of the old bulbs and that faint, familiar smell of cleaning fluid. I started down the hallway, one hand on my holster, flashlight slicing through the dark. Each door looked the same. Shut, silent, dust gathering around the hinges. Room 2, room 3, room 4, then another sound. A soft thud, above me again. The footsteps had followed me into the hallway. They moved in the same rhythm as before, staying just one step ahead, keeping pace no matter how slow I went. I stopped. They stopped. I walked again. They matched me perfectly. It felt like someone or something was mirroring me from the ceiling. I aimed the light upward, but all I saw were water stains, faint cracks in plaster. The sound came again, closer this time, directly overhead. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to move forward. Each step echoed down the corridor like I was walking inside a hollow drum. The sound above mirrored every one of them, right until I reached room 9, the door that shouldn't exist anymore, the one that was empty, cold and wrong. The moment I stopped in front of it, the footsteps stopped too. I waited 10 seconds, maybe 15. Then, faintly, I heard something scrape against the ceiling right above the door, then a whisper. So faint I thought I was imagining it. It said my name, Daniel. My whole body went rigid. I felt that name crawl down my spine like ice water. The voice was familiar, not distorted or ghostly. It sounded like me. I whispered back, "Who's there?" No answer. Then, from behind the door of room 9, I heard breathing. Slow, heavy, like someone standing on the other side, pressing their face against the wood, waiting for me to open it. I turned the handle, but it wouldn't move. Jammed tight. Then came another sound, knocking, not from inside the room. From above it, 3 slow knocks. Then another whisper, "Come upstairs." I don't know why, but I looked up, and for a moment, I saw something that shouldn't have been possible. The ceiling above room 9 wasn't flat anymore. There was a small square outline, like the edge of a hidden hatch. It hadn't been there before. I reached up, touched the plaster. It felt soft, almost wet. My fingertips came away with gray dust. The air grew thick, like breathing through smoke. Then I heard it again, footsteps, moving fast this time, across the entire length of the hallway, like something running on its hands and feet above the tiles. I backed away, flashlight trembling in my grip. The ceiling above me bulged downward, just for a second, like something heavy had dropped onto it. Then silence again. When I turned around, the hallway lights flickered. Every door that had been shut was now slightly open. All of them. I could see into the rooms, each one identical, empty, beds untouched. But as the lights flashed, I caught glimpses of figures standing inside, blurred silhouettes, motionless, heads tilted toward me. Then darkness. When the light came back, they were gone. I don't remember running, but suddenly I was back in the lobby, breathing hard, flashlight beam darting across the counter. The clock still said 2:13. Then came one final sound. Not footsteps this time. Dragging. Something was moving across the ceiling above the lobby. Slow and uneven, like a body being pulled by its arms. It scraped across the plaster, each movement making the light fixtures tremble. I stepped back until my heel hit the door. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. The dragging sound reached the center of the ceiling, then stopped. And then, from directly above me, 3 faint taps. I held my breath. The silence stretched out like a rope, tight and endless. Then something fell. A small piece of plaster landed at my feet. Then another. Then another. I looked up just as a long crack spread across the ceiling, right above where I stood. The crack widened, dust raining down. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second, I saw a face peering through the crack. It was me, but not me now. Younger, eyes hollow, expression blank, staring down like I was the one trapped on the wrong side. The face blinked once, slow, deliberate, then whispered in my voice, "You're underneath." The crack sealed itself, just like that. Gone. No hole, no sound, no dust. The ceiling looked untouched again. I don't know how long I stood there. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I finally turned and stepped outside. The air felt thick and sour. The world around the motel too quiet. Even the night insects had stopped. When I looked back, the windows glowed faintly, like something inside was moving just beyond the glass. And then, faintly, I heard it again. Footsteps. Not above this time. Behind me. Slow, steady, perfectly matching mine. I turned, light trembling in my hand. The parking lot was empty, but the sound didn't stop. It just followed me everywhere I went. And that's when I realized something I hadn't before. The footsteps weren't coming from the ceiling. They were coming from right above my head. Wherever I went, they followed, like I brought the motel's ceiling with me. By the next morning, I convinced myself that exhaustion had twisted my mind, that the footsteps, the whispers, even that face I'd seen in the ceiling, they were just tricks of fatigue and fear. I told myself I'd slept wrong, that maybe I'd dozed off for a few minutes and dreamed it all. I even laughed about it, softly, standing by the lobby window as dawn light pushed through the fog. But there was one problem. The door wouldn't open. At first, I thought the latch had jammed overnight. The wood in that old frame always swelled with moisture. I twisted the handle, pulled harder, then slammed my shoulder into it. Nothing. It didn't even rattle. I tried the back door. Same thing. The metal felt warm to the touch, even though the air was cold. I shoved until my arms trembled, but it wouldn't give. That's when the panic started. A small spark in my chest that grew too fast. I told myself I was just tired, that I'd get a crowbar, or maybe go through a window. I went to front desk, grabbed my keys, and tried every room door in that place. Every one of them was locked from the inside. I'm not sure when I first noticed the air had changed. It was thicker, like the motel was holding its breath. My footsteps echoed differently too, slower, flatter, like sound didn't move through the halls anymore. I went back to the lobby and called the sheriff's station. No signal. I tried the radio. Just static, a deep, wet static that almost sounded like someone breathing close to the mic. And then, faintly, beneath that sound, I thought I heard something else. Knocking. Not from a door. From the walls. At first, it was faint. Just one soft knock behind the wallpaper near the office door. I froze, listening. Then another, lower down. Then two more, right beside me, as if someone was walking along the inside of the wall, dragging their hands as they moved. I pressed my ear to it. It sounded like skin, not wood or insects or air pipes. Skin, sliding, rubbing, pushing. Then came a dull thump, something pressing harder. The wallpaper stretched slightly, the shape of a palm pushing outward. I stumbled back. The handprint faded, leaving behind a faint, greasy mark. I whispered, "Hello?" My voice sounded too loud in that silence. The answer came from everywhere. 100 soft knocks, all at once. From the walls, the ceiling, even the floor. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound crawled inside anyway, vibrating through the air, through me. It wasn't random. There was rhythm, a pattern, almost like it was trying to talk. I shouted, "Stop it!" and slammed my flashlight against the nearest wall. The noise stopped immediately. For a few seconds, there was nothing but my breathing and the faint buzz of the lights overhead. Then, slowly, the wall I'd hit began to bulge outward. A single handprint pushed through the plaster. Then another, dozens of them, each one pressing just enough to stretch the surface. Fingers twitching under the paint. I could see the outlines of wrists, forearms, like the walls weren't made of wood and insulation anymore, but something soft, something alive. And then I felt it, a faint pressure against my back. I turned around slowly. The wallpaper behind me was moving, pulsing, like it was breathing, a shape pressed outward, tall and human. Its head tilting to one side, its hands sliding down the wall until the tips of its fingers brushed my shoulder. The touch was cold and damp, like touching a fish just pulled from the water. I stepped back, heart pounding, but the wall followed. The shape pressed harder, leaving indentations as it moved closer, like it was trying to crawl through plaster. I could hear it now, a faint whispering, layered and wet, like hundreds of voices murmuring under their breath. My flashlight flickered, and in that half second of darkness, the whispering stopped. When the beam came back, every wall in the lobby was covered in handprints, dozens, maybe hundreds, all facing inward. I ran to the front door, slamming my hands against it, screaming for help. The glass didn't even shake. I could see my cruiser through it, parked right outside, untouched. But the world beyond the glass looked wrong. Still, empty, like the fog outside had thickened into something solid. I couldn't see the highway anymore. Couldn't even see the sky. It was like the motel was floating in a void. That's when the lights began to dim, one by one. The far hallway first, then the office, then the vending area. Each bulb gave a faint pop, a short flash, and went dark, until only the lobby light remained. I sank behind the counter, gripping my flashlight like a weapon. My throat felt raw, and the silence pressed down hard enough to make my ears ring. Then footsteps, not above this time, not behind the walls, inside the room. They came from the far end of the hallway, slow, dragging, uneven. I couldn't see anything in that darkness, but I heard the sound of something scraping against the wall as it moved closer. The steps echoed through the tiles, soft but heavy, like bare feet on wet concrete. I aimed my flashlight toward the hall. The beam barely reached, just caught a glimpse of something turning the corner. It looked like a person at first, but their body was wrong. Too long, too thin, Their hands scraped the walls as they moved, leaving streaks behind them, dark and glossy. They stopped when the light hit them. I couldn't see their face, only the outline. Then in a low, broken voice, it said, "Sheriff, help us." The sound made my stomach turn. It wasn't one voice. It was many, all speaking through the same mouth, all layered together. Then they moved closer. Every step made the floor vibrate slightly. The walls rippled again, handprints pressing outward with each sound. I could feel the pressure through the soles of my boots. I shouted for it to stop, raised my gun, but my hands wouldn't stay steady. The flashlight beam trembled across the floor. The figure reached the end of the hallway, where the tile met the carpet of the lobby. It stopped there like it was testing something invisible. Then it pressed its hand against the wall beside it and melted. Its body sank into the plaster, like it was slipping through water. I could see its face for just a second, stretched wide across the surface, eyes open, mouth moving silently. Then it was gone. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, my breathing sharp and uneven. I turned toward the back office, thinking maybe there was a window I could break. But when I got there, the window wasn't there anymore, just a wall, like it had never existed. I ran to the supply room. Same thing. Every window sealed shut. Every door vanished into smooth, unbroken walls. And that's when I saw the new door. It hadn't been there before. It was at the end of the hall, perfectly centered, painted the same dull color as the rest of the motel. No handle, no keyhole, just a small sign nailed above it that read, "Check out." I stared at it for a long time, waiting for it to move, for something to happen. Then, behind me, the whispering started again. This time it was clear, dozens of voices, all speaking in unison, low and patient. "Stay, you're part of it now." The walls began to tremble. Handprints pushed out again, hundreds of them, overlapping, sliding toward me. I stumbled backward, tripping over the counter stool. The floor beneath me rippled like liquid. The voices got louder, closer. "Stay, stay." I screamed and ran for checkout door. I hit it once with my shoulder. Nothing. Again, harder, still nothing. Then I felt it. Hands, pressing from behind me, from above, from beneath. The walls around me convulsed, hundreds of palms pushing outward, grabbing at my coat, my wrists, my hair. They pulled with just enough pressure to hold me there. I could feel the weight of them through the air. Not angry, not violent, desperate, like they were begging me not to leave. I slammed the door again, and this time it cracked down the middle. Bright white light poured through, blinding and cold. The hands froze. The whispering stopped. For one perfect second, everything was still. Then, as I fell through that light, I heard one final voice behind me. Soft, almost kind. "Don't leave us alone again, Sheriff." And then the door slammed shut. You spend enough years in a small town, and you start recognizing every kind of sound. Engines, coyotes, the way wind moves through empty streets at night. All becomes background noise. So when you hear something that doesn't belong, it sticks with you. That night, the call came in just before midnight. Dispatch said someone had reported screams coming from the old farmhouse on Route 7, the one that's been empty since the 90s. I remember sighing, rubbing the back of my neck as I stared at the rain sliding down my windshield. The house had been a popular spot for teenagers for years. They'd sneak in a drink, make up ghost stories, break things. I'd been out there half a dozen times before, but the voice on the call wasn't a kid. It was an older man. He sounded panicked, kept saying they're screaming again. That word, again, bothered me. I drove out there anyway. The road was wash and fog, the kind that sits low, hugging the ground, swallowing up your headlights no matter how high you cranked them. The closer I got to the farmhouse, the quieter everything became. Even the rain softened, like the whole world was holding its breath. I parked at the edge of property and stepped out. My boots sank into mud, and I could smell that old wet hay scent, the kind that lingers even after decades of abandonment. The farmhouse stood at the top of a small rise, half hidden behind a line of bare trees. The roof had caved in on one side, and most of the paint had peeled down to the gray wood beneath. But the strange thing was, The yard. There were toys in it, not just broken bits of old plastic. Toys. A red tricycle. A small metal pail. A doll with one arm missing. Sitting upright in the grass like someone had just set it there. I stood there for a minute, rain dripping off my hat, staring at that yard. Something about it felt wrong. I'd been to this property a dozen times over the years. I remembered it clearly. The place was always empty, barren, no toys, no furniture, nothing left but dust and cobwebs. But now, scattered across the mud, there were little signs of life, like the place had been frozen mid-laughter. I tried calling out, "Sheriff's Department." No answer. I walked toward the porch. The wood creaked under my weight, swollen from years of rain. The front door hung half open, scraping lightly against the floor whenever the wind pushed through. Inside smelled like rot and old rainwater. Wallpaper curled off the walls like peeling skin. I called out again. "If anyone's here, you need to come out now." Silence, but from deeper inside the house, I thought I heard something. Not a scream. Not anymore. Just a soft whimpering sound, high and thin, like a child trying to catch their breath after crying too long. I followed the noise through the front room. The floor was littered with old newspapers, toys, and empty cans. A wooden horse lay on its side near the stairs, its paint faded to a sickly pink. As I stepped further in, I noticed something else. The air was warmer. Not by much, but enough to notice, like there was a small fire somewhere nearby. I reached the living room and stopped. There, sitting in the middle of the floor, was a small wooden chair. On top of it sat a toy phone, one of those old Fisher-Price kind with a rotary dial and a smiling face painted on it. The cord was frayed, and one of the wheels was missing. The receiver was off the hook. That's where the sound was coming from. The faintest whisper of static. But beneath it, I could swear I heard something else. A voice. I leaned closer. It was soft, almost like a lullaby. I couldn't make out the words, but it had rhythm. A woman's voice. Gentle. Then it stopped. The static died completely, replaced by the sound of breathing. Slow, uneven breathing. I pulled back fast, heart hammering. The toy phone's receiver slipped off the chair and hit the floor, still attached by its cord. The breathing stopped. For a moment, everything went still again. Then, from upstairs, a loud thump. I pointed my flashlight toward the stairwell. The top was lost in shadow, but I could see dust falling from the ceiling where the sound had come from. "Hello," I called. "This is the Sheriff's Department. Is someone up there?" No reply. I took one step up, then another. The stairs groaned beneath me. Halfway up, I noticed handprints on the wall. Small ones. Children's hands. The prints were smeared downward, like they'd been sliding as they were made. At the top of the stairs, the air felt heavier. My light cut through a hallway lined with closed doors. And then I heard it again, faint crying coming from the last door on the left. It sounded real, not like an echo or an animal. Real. I moved slowly toward it. The floor bowed under my weight. When I reached the door, I hesitated. The paint was chipped, and someone had carved something into the wood near the handle. I brushed away the dust and read the words. No more calls. That stopped me cold. I tried the knob anyway. It turned easily. The door creaked open into a small bedroom. The light from my flashlight hit dust motes swirling in the air. The crying stopped instantly. The room was empty except for a small bed frame, no mattress, and a dresser pushed against the window. On the wall above the bed, there were faded marks, tallies, scratched into the plaster, hundreds of them, and on the floor, just beside the bed, was another toy phone, identical to the one downstairs. I stared at it for a long time. Then, stupidly, I lifted the receiver. Static again. Then, "Sheriff." My throat closed up. The voice was faint but familiar. It was the same man who called dispatch earlier. Only now he sounded terrified. "Don't answer them," he whispered. "Don't." The line went dead. I dropped the receiver. It hit the floor with a dull clack, and the whole house seemed to react. A deep vibration rolled through the walls, subtle but unmistakable, like something huge shifting its weight beneath the foundation. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere downstairs, A door slammed shut. I ran back into the hallway. The air had changed again. It smelled burnt now, thick and sharp, like an old fireplace that hadn't been cleaned. As I moved toward the stairs, I noticed the tallies on the wall weren't just in that one room anymore. They were everywhere, scratched into the paint, carved into the wood, over doors, over windows. Hundreds of them, thousands maybe, and faintly, under the sound of my boots creaking across the floorboards, I heard another noise, dozens of tiny voices whispering all at once. It was coming from inside the walls. I shined my flashlight down the stairs, and that's when I saw them, the toys. Every single toy that had been scattered across the yard was now inside the house, placed neatly along the base of the staircase. The tricycle, the doll, the pail, all lined up in a perfect row, facing upward, and in the center of them, the toy phone from downstairs sat upright again. Its receiver was back on the hook. I felt my stomach twist. Slowly, the receiver began to lift by itself and fall back into place. Once, twice, like someone invisible was testing it. I turned and ran for the front door. When I reached it, I froze. The door was shut tight. I didn't remember closing it. And when I tried to open it, the knob didn't move. It wasn't locked. It was just dead. No give, no sound, no resistance. Like it wasn't even real anymore. Behind me, I heard the toy phone ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Each ring louder than the one before. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Instead, I reached for my radio, called for dispatch. Nothing but static. And then, through the static, that same woman's voice whispered. So close it felt like she was right behind me. Someone has to answer. I turned, flashlight trembling in my hand, and saw the glow of the toy phone in the dark. Its eyes, the painted ones on its face, looked different now. Wet, reflective, watching me. And before I could move, the receiver lifted one last time. A child's voice came through, soft and calm. "Welcome back, Sheriff." When I got back to the station that morning, I didn't tell anyone where I'd been. I just said it was a false alarm, kids messing around again. But that wasn't the truth. I didn't tell them about the toys, or the voice on the phone, or the words carved into that door. I couldn't, because I didn't understand it myself. Still, all day I couldn't shake the sound of that child's voice. That calm, almost welcoming tone. "Welcome back, Sheriff." I hadn't been back to that property in years. Not since the fire. But the way it said it, like it knew me, that got stuck in my head. I told myself I'd imagined it. That it was just static twisting my brain after a long night. But deep down I knew better. 2 nights later, the call came again. Same number. Same old man. This time he didn't say much. Just whispered. "They're playing again." And then the line went dead. I sat there for a minute, staring at the receiver, hoping someone else would pick it up, but no one did, so I grabbed my coat and went back. The road looked different that night. The fog was thicker, and the trees leaned closer to the road, their branches dripping with mist. It felt like the whole world was closing in on that house. When I pulled up, the headlights cut across the yard, and I froze. The toys were gone, not scattered or broken. Gone. The grass looked untouched, as if nothing had ever been there. But the front door was wide open. I stepped inside, calling out, "Sheriff's Department." No answer, just the sound of my boots creaking against the warped floorboards. It was colder than before. The air felt hollow, like the sound didn't have anywhere to go. The house smelled faintly of smoke, not fresh, but old, baked into the wood, deep and permanent. I walked through the living room, shining my flashlight across the walls. The tallies were still there, etched into every inch of plaster. But there were more now, hundreds more. They looked fresh, the edges lighter, cleaner than the rest. Something in me started to feel wrong, like the house was aware that I'd come back. And then I heard it, a laugh. It came from upstairs, a soft, breathy giggle that floated down through the stairwell. It was quick, almost playful. I froze mid-step, my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. "Hello," I called, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. No answer, just another giggle. this one a little closer. I waited, heart pounding, listening. Then came a faint scuffing sound, like tiny feet running across the floor above me. I tried to tell myself it was an animal, maybe raccoons, or a possum. Something simple, something alive. But then the laughter came again. This time, it wasn't above me. It was behind me, right behind me. I spun around, shining my light across the living room. But there was nothing, just dust floating through the beam. Still, I could feel it, the weight of someone standing there. Who's there? I whispered. No reply, just silence, and then the shadows moved. At first, I thought it was a flashlight flickering, but it wasn't. The shadows on the walls were shifting, stretching, bending away from the corners. They slid across the ceiling, down the walls, like oil moving underwater. I backed up, breathing hard. My light caught the edge of one shadow that didn't quite match the shape of anything in the room. It looked like a child, small, thin, head tilted to the side. But there was no face, just emptiness. And when I moved the beam away, it didn't follow the light. It stayed there, still and solid, like it didn't care about shadows or direction. I whispered, "Jesus Christ," before I could stop myself. The child laughed again. Only this time, it wasn't one laugh. It was many, like echoes coming from inside the walls, all overlapping, all slightly off time. And in between them, faint whispering. I could almost make out words. "Come play, come play, come play." My throat went dry. I turned toward the hallway, and that's when I saw a movement in the corner of my eye. Something small darting past the doorway into the kitchen. I followed, fast. When I stepped inside, my boots splashed in water. The floor was soaked. The old pipes above had burst long ago, but this was fresh. My light hit the sink, and I froze again. The water was running. I moved closer. The faucet turned on full blast, and the basin was overflowing, spilling onto the floor. There were small handprints in the water, clear, visible, pressed into the surface like oil floating on top. They appeared one after another, leading across the counter, down the cabinet, and into the puddle at my feet. And then the sound of footsteps, tiny wet footsteps circling me. The laughter came again, this time right beside my ear. I swung the light toward it, but there was nothing there, only shadows shifting on the wall. Then the faucet shut off. The sound of dripping water filled the room. Each drop echoed too loud, like the house wanted me to hear it. I took a step back toward the hallway, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't breathing right. My chest felt tight. My hands were shaking. I needed to get out. As I turned, the flashlight beam caught something on the floor by the door. Something small. A toy. A wooden block with a single letter painted on it. The paint was chipped, but I could still read it. S. There was another block beside it. Then another. They spelled out a word. Sheriff. I felt my knees weaken. The blocks began to shake. Slowly at first, then harder until they scattered across the floor. And underneath that noise, the laughter returned. Only now it wasn't playful anymore. It sounded wrong. Deep, broken, like a child trying to laugh through water. I stumbled back, slamming into the wall, and that's when I noticed something new. On the far side of the room, near the window, a shadow. It was shaped like a child, but longer, stretched tall across the wall like someone hanging by invisible strings. Its head tilted all the way back, too far. Its mouth a dark hole that moved when the laughter did. And then, slowly, it turned its head toward me. The beam of my flashlight dimmed, flickered once, twice, then died completely. The room went black. In the dark, I could hear it breathing. Close. Too close. I tried to move, but the floor felt soft under my boots, like the wood was swelling, pulsing slightly. And then, faintly, the voice of a child whispered beside my ear. "Why did you leave us?" I froze. Something cold brushed against my sleeve, small fingers curling lightly around my wrist. I pulled away, but the grip tightened. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. I fumbled for my lighter, flicked it open, and for half a second the flame caught. The room was empty. No shadow, no figure, nothing. just the small wooden blocks floating slowly on the puddle of water, bumping against each other with a faint, hollow sound. I didn't think. I ran down the hallway, through the front door, out into the cold air. I didn't stop until I reached my cruiser. When I looked back, the farmhouse stood perfectly still. The front door had swung shut behind me. No laughter, no movement, just silence. But then, as I reached for the ignition, I saw something in the rear-view mirror. In the upstairs window, the one from that first night, there was a shape, a child silhouette, standing perfectly still. And as I stared, the glass began to fog from the inside. Small fingers drew a shape into it, a simple smiley face, and below it, one word written in the mist: stay. I didn't plan to go back to the farmhouse. After what happened that night, I told myself I was done, but something about that place didn't let go. It stayed in my head, like a word stuck on the tip of your tongue that you can't quite remember. Every quiet moment, I'd hear that laugh again, that hollow, watery sound of a child that wasn't there. And then there were the dreams. They started a few nights later. I'd wake up sweating, half sure I could still hear water dripping somewhere nearby. Sometimes I'd see shapes in the corners of my room that disappeared when I blinked. But it wasn't until the fourth night that I knew I had to go back. Because that night I dreamed about a door. Not just any door, the door from the farmhouse. But this time, it wasn't in that house. It was in mine. I woke up around 3 a.m. The house was still quiet. My dog wasn't barking. Nothing was wrong, except for the feeling that something had shifted. I got up, went to get some water, and that's when I saw it. In the hallway, between the coat rack and the old family photos, there was a door that hadn't been there before. At first, I thought I was half asleep. Maybe I was just confused. Maybe it was the lighting. But I reached out, flicked the switch, and the bulb above me hummed to life. It was real. The frame was old. Same warp wood as the farmhouse. Same peeling white paint. The doorknob was a tarnished brass, worn smooth, like it had been touched for years. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, my heart knocking against my ribs. And then, against every instinct I had, I reached out and turned the knob. It was cold. When I opened it, I expected to see a wall, or maybe the back of a closet. But what I saw made my stomach twist, because I knew that room. Even after all these years, I knew it. It was my room, my childhood bedroom. The wallpaper was still the same, faded blue with little white clouds. My old wooden dresser was against the far wall, still carved with the initials I'd scratched into it when I was 8. But it wasn't right. The air that drifted out was damp and heavy, smelling faintly of mold and burnt wood. The ceiling sagged, the wallpaper bubbled and peeled in strips, and my bed, my old twin bed, was rotting. The mattress sunken in like someone had been lying there too long. Everything in that room looked like it had been buried and dug back up again. And yet, I stepped inside. It was quiet in there, too quiet. My boots creaked on the warped floorboards as I looked around. Every detail was wrong but familiar. The faded toys, the cracked window, the stuffed bear on the shelf missing one eye. My chest tightened as I picked it up. It was the same bear I'd lost in a fire years ago. The one they said I probably dropped while running out. I hadn't thought about it in decades, but now it was here, still warm. I dropped it, stumbling back, and that's when I saw the writing on the wall. Just above the bed, written in thick, uneven letters that looked burned into the wallpaper. You left US. I backed toward the door, but the hallway was gone. The doorway led into darkness now. Not shadow, nothing. Just a thick, black void where my house should have been. And then, from behind me, came the sound of something moving. It was faint at first, the slow drag of fabric across the floor, followed by a soft scraping sound. I didn't turn right away. I just stood there, frozen, staring into that empty doorway. When I finally did, my stomach dropped. The bed was moving. It shifted slightly, creaking under a weight that wasn't there. Dust fell from the ceiling, and then I heard it, that laugh, faint, breathy, coming from inside the bed. I could see the mattress rising, slowly. Something was pushing up from underneath it. I whispered, "No, no, no," without realizing I was saying it. The mattress split open. A hand reached out, small, pale, wet. It pressed against the sheet, fingers twitching, nails scraping against the fabric. Another hand followed, then the shape of a head buried beneath the torn blanket. The voice that came out wasn't a child's anymore. It was older, rougher, layered with static. You said you'd come back. I stumbled back toward the doorway, but there was nowhere to go. My hand hit the wall, except it didn't feel like a wall anymore. It was soft, pulsing, almost like skin. The voice laughed again, closer now. "Don't leave again, Sheriff." I turned, and in that instant, everything in the room seemed to breathe. The floor shifted under my boots. The wallpaper peeled faster, curling and blackening, as if it were burning. The toys began to melt, plastic faces sagging, eyes dripping like candle wax. I could barely breathe. The air tasted sour, metallic. I reached for the doorknob, but it wasn't there anymore. The frame was empty, and beyond it, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was another room, not my hallway, not my house. It was a farmhouse. That same hallway, those same burned walls, the same puddles glinting faintly in the dark. I didn't understand. The walls around me pulsed again, a slow rhythmic beat like a heart. The sound of water dripped from somewhere above, and the laughter grew louder, echoing from every direction. "Stay." That single word shook the room. The walls cracked, dust rained down, and the ceiling sagged further. I forced myself through the doorway, into the farmhouse hallway, gasping as the air shifted back to cold. When I turned to look behind me, the door was gone, just solid, burned wood where it had been. I ran out of that house without looking back. I don't remember the drive home. I don't remember the roads or the fog, or even locking my door when I got inside. All I remember is sitting there, on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands. They were covered in soot, and under the dirt, faint red marks, like small fingerprints. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that room again. My old room, only it wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to something else now, something that remembered me. And somewhere, behind the ringing in my ears, I could still hear that voice. "You said you'd come back." The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had been a dream, a hallucination, some kind of breakdown. I told myself I'd been awake too long, working too many nights alone. But when I walked into my hallway, my heart stopped. Right there, in the spot where the door had been, the wallpaper was torn. Not cleanly, clawed, and written beneath, in the same uneven burn marks as before, were two words. "See you." That was 3 nights ago. Since then, I've heard footsteps in the hall, late at night. Sometimes a light knock at my bedroom door. Sometimes a laugh, soft and patient. And I know what it wants, because that door didn't appear by accident. It came back because I remembered. And if what I saw in that room was really my past, then maybe I didn't just leave something behind in that fire. Maybe I trapped it there. And now, after all these years, it's finally found a way back. There's a stretch of track that cuts through our county like a scar, old and rusted, half swallowed by weeds and time. They say no trains run through there anymore. But sometimes, late at night, people still hear the whistle. I used to laugh at that. I mean, I'm the sheriff. I've driven every road in this town, walked through every field. I know what's real and what's just stories. But the thing about stories is, sometimes they start out as truth. You just don't recognize it at first. It was a little past midnight when the call came through. A man named Eli Harver called dispatch. Said he'd seen lights on the track behind his farmhouse. Said the whole ground shook like something heavy had passed by. Problem was, that track's been shut down for nearly 30 years. I was already out on patrol, so I figured I'd check out myself. It's what you do out here. When you're the only law between a few thousand acres of nothing in the dark, you can't just write off calls like that. The night was cold enough that my breath came out in long white ribbons. I remember the way the fog hung low along the ground, twisting to the grass like it was alive. The kind of night that makes you feel small even inside your own skin. The old rail line runs parallel to County Road 6. I parked my cruiser near the crossing sign, bent half rusted, its paint eaten away years ago. I shut the engine off, The hum of the radio died, and the silence that followed, it felt wrong. Too thick, like the air itself was holding its breath. I got out, flashlight in hand, and started walking the gravel shoulder. My boots crunched on frost. The beam of light cut through the fog, and every few seconds I caught the glint of the rails, shining dull silver beneath the moonlight. No movement, no sound, just the wind brushing through the tall grass. I crouched, ran my fingers along one of the rails. Cold as ice. I don't know what I expected. Warmth, maybe a sign that something heavy had passed recently. But there was nothing, just the quiet weight of an old world forgotten. I turned back toward the cruiser, figuring Eli must have seen a truck light reflecting off the fog or something. But then I heard it, a whistle, faint at first, like it was miles away. That low, lonely wail that cuts through everything else. I froze. You don't mistake a train whistle. It's a sound that carves its way right into you, like something ancient remembering it still exists. I lifted the radio to my mouth, but my thumb just hovered there. What was I going to say? I hear a ghost train? Dispatch would have laughed. Hell, I would have laughed. So I didn't call it in. I just started walking down the track, toward the sound. The whistle came again, louder this time, closer, and underneath it, I swear I could feel the vibration in the soles of my boots. A low tremor running to the ground like something alive was crawling beneath the earth. I pointed my flashlight down the rail and squinted into the dark. Nothing, just the endless stretch of fog and steel. Then I saw the light. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the mist, some reflection or a passing car. But it was too steady, too round, a single headlamp, far down the track, cutting through the night like an eye opening. My stomach dropped, because even though I could see it, I couldn't hear the train anymore. The air had gone still again. No engine, no clatter of wheels, just that cold silence. I kept walking forward anyway. That's what I do. I follow the noise, even when there isn't any. The light grew brighter, the fog glowing pale and sickly white around it. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I remember whispering something to myself, some half-prayer I hadn't said since I was a kid. Then, for just a second, I thought I saw movement along the tracks. Figures, like people standing shoulder to shoulder, outlined against the fog. But when I blinked, they were gone. The light flickered once and vanished. Silence again. I stood there for what felt like forever, just listening. My breath, my heart, the small creak of metal cooling in the cold. Then I heard the clink, the sound of a rail bolt settling, and another, one by one, small metallic echoes traveling down the line like the track itself was shifting. That's when I noticed something strange. The rails ahead of me, they looked wet, like rain had fallen there, but nowhere else. The wood ties glistened, and when I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't water. It was oil, or something thick and black that smelled faintly of iron. It streaked along the rails in both directions. And the weirdest part was the warmth. When I touched it with my fingers, it was warm. Something about that heat made me step back, because it didn't make sense. That track hadn't seen a train in decades. There's no power out here. No reason for the metal to feel like it's been holding onto something. I started to back away. Slowly, then my radio crackled. "Sheriff, you out there by the crossing?" It was dispatch. The voice sounded faint, warped by static. I pressed the button. "Yeah, I'm here. You copy." More static. Then faintly, "Shouldn't be out there, train." "Say again." Nothing, just that dry hiss, like wind blowing through a dead channel. The air shifted. I could smell smoke now. Not the kind that burns wood. This was older, thicker, coal smoke, heavy and bitter. My eyes started to sting, and I turned toward the source. And that's when I saw it again. The light, closer this time. It wasn't just one. There were three now, arranged like the front lamps of an old locomotive. The rails beneath me trembled. The ground started to hum. But there was still no sound. No roar, no screech, just vibration. Like something was gliding through, unseen. I stepped back off the track. My flashlight flickered once, then went out completely. All I could see was that glow cutting through the mist, growing brighter until I had to shield my eyes. The warmth grew, pressing against my skin, crawling up the back of my neck. And then it passed. No wind, no motion, just the sudden absence of everything. When I looked back, the light was gone, but the air was still warm. And on the rail, I noticed something else. Fingerprints. Long, black smears running the length of the metal, like someone had dragged their hands along as the train passed. I didn't wait after that. I turned and walked back toward my cruiser, keeping my light pointed at the ground. I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't want to see what might have been behind me. By the time I reached the car, the radio was clear again. Dispatch was asking if I'd found anything. I just said, no, must have been the wind. But before I got in, I glanced back one last time. Far down the line, through the fog, a faint red glow pulsed once, like the backlight of a train disappearing into the dark. It shouldn't have been there. There are no trains scheduled on those tracks. Haven't been for 30 years. But that night, standing alone by the crossing, I swear, I could still feel the rails humming under my boots, like they were waiting for something, or someone. And for the first time in my career, I didn't write it down in the report. Some things you just keep to yourself. I didn't sleep much after that night on the tracks. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear that whistle again, low, distant, like it was calling my name through the dark. You ever have a sound get stuck in your head so deep that silence starts to feel wrong? That's what it became for me. A kind of hum that followed me around, even in daylight. For a few days, I told myself to let it go, write it off as exhaustion or fog playing tricks on the light. That's what I said in my report. 2. Nothing suspicious found. But every word that felt like a lie. 2 nights later, I was back on patrol. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the old tracks, but the road kept pulling me there anyway, like gravity. When I reached the crossing again, the fog had returned. It was thicker this time, like the air itself was clinging to me. My headlights barely cut through it. The world shrank to the size of a tunnel, and everything beyond it just disappeared. I told myself I'd just check the area one last time, just to be sure. That's what I do. I make sure. I parked on the shoulder, turned off the lights, and let the engine tick itself quiet. Then I stepped out. The cold hit me hard, sharp enough to bite through the jacket. And under it all, there was again that hum, low, constant, the rails, vibrating ever so slightly beneath the frost. It shouldn't have been possible. There were no scheduled trains. The line hadn't seen power in 30 years. Still, I followed the sound. The fog thinned just enough of moon to break through, laying a pale stripe over the tracks. That's when I saw it. Faint light gliding across the horizon. Not a headlight this time. This was dimmer, warmer, like the soft flicker of lanterns moving through the dark. And then it came into view. The train. It rolled silently along the track, massive and black as coal. Its wheels didn't screech, didn't grind. It was like it was floating, gliding through mist that swallowed half its shape. Every window was glowing, and behind that glass were people. At least, they looked like people. Figures sitting still, side by side, each one staring straight ahead. No movement, no faces I could make out. Just silhouettes, locked in the kind of stillness that makes you hold your breath. I couldn't tell if it was moving fast or slow. It felt like both, depending on how I looked at it. The closer I got, the more the air grew heavy, thick with the scent of iron and smoke. I called out, "Hello?" My voice came out small against that soundless mass of metal. No response. Then one of them moved. A figure near the window turned its head toward me. It was just a shape at first. No face I could see. Just a shift in the dark that felt wrong. Like watching something realize you exist. The train started to slow. Not stop, just ease down until it crawled past where I stood. That's when I saw their faces. Pale, colorless, every one of them staring forward. Their mouths slightly open, eyes wide like they'd been caught mid-scream but frozen there. And then I realized they weren't sitting. They were pressed against the glass, their hands flat on it, as if trying to push through. I took a step closer, and one of the figures mirrored me, its hands sliding upward in the same motion, palm to palm against the glass. Except the glass was fogged from the inside, and when it exhaled, I saw the mist spread across the pane, like it was breathing. My breath caught, my flashlight flickered, and for half a second, the figure's face sharpened into view. It was a man, or what used to be one. Skin gray as ash, mouth stretched open wider than it should have gone. Black eyes sunk deep enough to look hollow. He mouthed something. 3 words. "Help me, please." Before I could react, he vanished, not stepped away. Just gone, like the fog had eaten him. I stumbled back, scanning the line of windows. One by one, the figures disappeared too, each one flickering out like dying lights, until the train was just an empty shadow sliding through the dark. But it didn't vanish completely this time. It kept moving, slow and steady, until it faded past a crossing and dissolved into the night. The silence that followed hit harder than the noise ever could. My ears rang with it, and underneath, faint and broken, I thought I heard something else. Screaming. Not loud, not clear, muffled, like it was trapped behind glass and dirt. Men, women, children, all blending together in that distant, awful sound. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't stop. It was inside me now, humming under my ribs like the rails had crawled their way into my chest. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it ended. The fog lifted, the cold eased, and I was standing there alone again, the night so still it felt staged. I checked the ground. No marks, no tracks, no sign of wheels. The rails were dry, untouched, but something dark caught my eye. Right where the train had slowed, there was a patch of frost melted away, forming the outline of a single handprint. 5 long fingers, burned into the ground. I don't know how long I stood there, staring, long enough for the frost to start reforming around it, like the night was erasing its mistake. When I finally climbed back into the cruiser, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The mirror kept catching shapes that weren't there, faint movement in the back seat that stopped when I turned. I even checked twice, flashlight sweeping through the cabin, telling myself it was just nerves. But right as I started the engine, I heard it again, a thud, soft, from the trunk. I didn't check it right then. I told myself I'd look once I got back to the station. But the truth, I didn't want to open it, because deep down, I already knew what I'd find. That sound, it wasn't metal or debris. It was rhythmic, slow, like the palm of a hand pressing against steel. Tap, pause, tap. By the time I pulled back onto the road, the noise had stopped. But I couldn't bring myself to look in the rearview mirror again. Halfway back to town, my radio crackled, that same static broken and dry. Then a voice, faint and distant. "Sheriff, don't let it stop." I slammed the brakes. The static cut out. I waited, breath shallow, staring at the radio. Nothing, just the soft hum of the engine. But as I started driving again, I noticed something I hadn't before. My headlights caught the sign at the edge of the crossing, the one that used to read County Line. Someone had painted over it in black, and underneath the paint, in faint letters barely visible under frost, were 2 words scratched into metal. "It stops." I reached out the window, wiped away the ice with my sleeve. The letters were old, carved deep enough to rust. Someone had written them there years ago. I drove the rest of the way back in silence. When I got to the station, I finally popped the trunk open. Empty. No sound. No marks. Nothing out of place. But I could still smell it, that faint, coal-heavy scent, like the inside of a tunnel after a train's gone through. I should have left it alone after that. I should have told myself it was over. But that night, when I hung my hat by the door and finally sat down, I heard the whistle again. Soft, far away, like it was waiting for me. And for the first time, I realized something that made my blood run cold. When I'd heard the train before, it had always come from the north. But this time, the sound was coming from town. By the 3rd night, I'd stopped pretending it wasn't real. The first time, I thought it was fog and nerves. The second time, maybe exhaustion. But this was different. That sound, the whistle, the faint hum in the rails, it wasn't coming from the countryside anymore. It was coming from town. It started around dusk. I was heading home. Same as always, driving slow past the old feed mill when I saw it. The fog rolling in again, thick and heavy, swallowing up the tree behind the silos. The air had that smell again, too. Burned coal, metal, like something ancient had clawed its way up from the earth. I should have gone home, but I turned left instead, back toward the old crossing. The road was empty, just that strip of cracked asphalt leading into fields. The headlights carved out a narrow tunnel through the fog. Every now and then, I'd see the glint of the rails cutting across the dirt like a scar. Then the radio went quiet. Not static, just dead. I tapped it once, twice. Nothing. That's when I noticed the hum again, faint under the tires, like the car itself was driving over something alive. When I reached the crossing, the warning lights were blinking, red and steady. The barrier arms, which hadn't worked in 30 years, were down. I stopped the car, left the engine running. At first, I felt relief. The rational part of me wanted to believe maybe someone was doing maintenance, or maybe the county had fixed the power lines. But when I stepped out, that idea died fast. The lights were flashing, but there was no electricity sound. No buzz. No hum of a transformer. Just that red glow pulsing against the fog like a heartbeat. I looked down the track. Nothing but darkness. But something about that darkness felt wrong. It wasn't empty, it was full. Dense. Heavy. Like looking into deep water. Then I saw it again. The shadows. They started small, stretching from the base of the signal post, sliding over the gravel. At first, I thought it was just the lights flickering through the fog, but then they kept going, reaching farther, longer, across the road, the grass, even up the fence on the other side. The air changed. It got colder, and that's when I realized the shadows were moving against the light. I took a step back. My boots crunched in the gravel, loud in the silence. The shadows thickened, pulling themselves into shapes, long, stretched silhouettes that didn't match anything around me. They looked human, sort of, tall, thin figures, all leaning forward like they were walking toward the crossing. But there was nothing there to cast them. No people, no train, just darkness moving like it had a purpose. Then I felt it, that low vibration in the ground again, the rails humming under my feet. I turned toward the horizon, and sure enough, there it was. The light, distant at first, barely a pinprick through the fog. But I knew that glow now. I could feel it in my chest before I even saw it clearly. The train was coming. The red lights flashed faster. The barrier arms creaked, the metal trembling. The air grew thicker, pressing against me like a storm front. I could hear the low rush of air, the faint whistle growing louder. But the strangest part, the shadows weren't staying put. They were spreading, crawling over the fields, stretching across the fences, spilling over the road like black water. I could see them sliding across the grass, long and thin, racing toward the distant barns and silos. And then they started to move upward. I swear to God, I saw them climbing, their stretched limbs dragging up the side of the mill, their bodies flattening against the metal walls as they reached higher and higher. No sound, no faces, just shifting black, crawling like oil in slow motion. The whistle screamed. I turned back to the track. The light was brighter now, splitting the fog apart in a white glare. The air was electric. My skin prickled. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something deeper, like the whole world had started vibrating. I jumped back into the cruiser, jammed it into reverse, and tried to back up. The engine sputtered once, then died. Dead silence. The lights on the dash flickered and went out. The only glow left came from the crossing signals. That same red pulse, steady and slow. And then everything stopped. The fog froze in place. The air, the sound, even the vibration under my boots. Gone. It felt like time had folded in on itself. That's when I noticed my reflection in the rear view mirror. Or rather, what was behind it. There were faces, faint, blurred, like shapes pressed up against foggy glass. Men, women, children, their mouths open, eyes hollow. They weren't in the back seat. They were in the mirror. I turned around. Nothing there. But when I looked back into the mirror, the faces were closer. The first one I could make out clearly was a woman. Her hair floated like it was underwater. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. Then the glass cracked. just a thin spider line running through the center, and her expression twisted into something I'll never forget. She mouthed the words, "It stops here." The whistle tore through the night. It was deafening this time, shaking the car, rattling the windows. I covered my ears, but it still pierced through, a sound that felt too big for this world. The light hit me next, white, blinding, swallowing the fog, the field, everything. Through it, I could see the train coming straight toward me. But the shadows, they weren't afraid. They welcomed it. They leaned forward, merging with the light as it passed. Only, the train never touched me. It split the world instead. Half light, half darkness, sliding past on rails that didn't seem to exist anymore. And through the windows, I saw them again, the passengers. Dozens of faces pressed the glass, their hands reaching, their mouths open in those same silent screams. And behind them, deeper inside the train, I saw something else. A shape, tall, narrow, wrapped in black smoke. Watching me. The train didn't slow this time. It rushed past without sound, the wind from it cutting cold against my face. The fog bent in its wake, pulling the shadows with it until both were gone. Then the light vanished. The rails were empty again. The car restarted on its own, just flicked back to life like nothing had happened. The radio hummed. The headlights came on. The crossing lights stopped flashing. Everything went quiet, except the world didn't look the same anymore. The sky had a faint red glow to it, far off toward town. The fields looked wrong, like the shadows hadn't fully left. They just hid beneath the surface, waiting. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, but not from fear, from something else. The steering wheel felt warm, too warm. I realized the heat wasn't coming from the car. It was coming from beneath me, from the ground. The rails were still humming. I drove home that night without looking in the mirror once. Not even when I passed the station road and saw the silhouette of that same old crossing sign, bent and half buried in dirt. Someone had scraped the paint off it recently, in the reflection of my headlights. I could see what was written underneath the rust. Next stop, I didn't think I'd go back there again. After the night the shadows crawled across the fields, I swore I'd never set foot near those tracks. But swearing something to yourself doesn't always make it true, because when something wants you, it doesn't need permission. It just waits. For the past week, I've been hearing it again. Not the whistle this time, just the hum, that deep vibration that crawls under your skin and settles in your chest. I'd feel it when I sat at my desk, when I tried to sleep, even when I walked through town. It was like the whole county was holding its breath. The lights in town flickered more than usual. The air felt wrong, thick and heavy, as if a storm was always about to break, but never did. I started getting reports, too. People said they'd seen the old crossing lights flashing again. Some claimed they heard a whistle right before dawn, carried over the hills. And then there was the girl. She came into the station, maybe 12 or 13, trembling and pale as bone. Said she'd been out with her dad near the field road when she saw the windows moving. I asked her what that meant, and she just kept whispering one thing over and over. The train didn't stop. Her father found her standing alone by the crossing. No tracks around. No sound. Nothing. But she said she saw me there. That was what froze me. She said, "You waved, Sheriff." And then she asked, "Why didn't you get on?" I hadn't been out there in days. At least, I thought I hadn't. That night, I couldn't sit still. The clock ticked too loud. The air in my office tasted like dust and iron. Around midnight, I took my keys and left without telling anyone. The road to the crossing felt longer than before. The field stretched wider, darker. Even the stars looked dimmer, as if they'd been pushed back by something moving beneath the horizon. When I reached the crossing, the fog was already waiting, thick and white, spilling across the road like a living thing. The warning lights were flashing again, steady, perfect rhythm. And beneath them, I could feel the hum of the rails. It wasn't just a vibration anymore. It was a heartbeat. I killed the engine and stepped out. The air hit me like cold breath. The world beyond the fog was silent. No crickets, no wind, not even the rustle of the trees. Just that steady pulse running through the ground. And then the whistle, faint, far off, but coming closer. I could feel it before I saw it. The pressure in the air building, the static crawling up my arms. The rails started to glow faint red beneath the frost, like veins lighting up under skin. And then, through the fog, the headlamp. It cut through the dark, bright and pale like the moon. The train slid forward out of nowhere, slow and silent, its shape half hidden in mist. No smoke this time, no sound, just light and shadow and the soft scrape of something that wasn't really touching the earth. The windows glowed again, and behind them, the passengers. They were clearer now, their faces pressed to the glass, eyes wide, mouths open, but no sound. They looked like they were breathing in sync, their hands tapping faintly against the windows. Tap, tap, like they were calling me. The train slowed. The doors slid open, though I never saw them move. One moment they were shut. The next, there was an opening, dark, waiting. The fog poured through it, curling along the ground like smoke from a fire that never burned out. I should have run. I should have left. But something about the air pulled at me, like gravity, but heavier, and I kept thinking about that little girl, about what she said. Why didn't you get on? Maybe I wanted to prove something. Maybe I just wanted it to end. Either way, I stepped forward. The hum grew louder. The ground trembled beneath my boots. As I got closer, the cold deepened. Not the kind that stings, but the kind that sinks into your bones and stays there. I reached the platform, if you could call it that, and looked inside. It wasn't empty. It was full. Rows of people sitting perfectly still, hands folded on their laps. Their eyes followed me, but none of them blinked. Their faces looked gray and soft, like wax left too long in the sun. And the deeper I looked, the less solid they seemed. More like fog wearing the memory of skin. The closest one to me, an older man in a conductor's coat, turned his head slow and deliberate. When he smiled, the skin on his cheeks cracked like dry paper. "Ticket, Sheriff?" I couldn't answer. My mouth was dry. My heart was a drum in my chest. But my feet still moved. One step, then another. The metal beneath me didn't creak. It breathed. When I stepped inside, the air changed. The fog outside fell silent, and everything around me turned still. The walls were lined with mirrors instead of windows. Each one showed a reflection of the same endless car, stretching forward forever. I turned back toward the door. It was gone. All that was left was glass. And in it, I saw myself. At least, I thought I did. My reflection wasn't matching me anymore. It was standing still, even when I moved. Then, slowly, it smiled. I stumbled backward, hit the seat behind me. The passengers didn't react. Their eyes stayed locked ahead, mouths barely open like they were whispering something too quiet to hear. I listened, and under the hum, I heard it, a single word, over and over, from every mouth. "Stay." The train began to move. No sound of wheels, no lurch, no motion I could feel. But the world outside the mirrors shifted. The fog peeled away, showing fields I didn't recognize. Towns, forests, deserts, flashing past like film running too fast through a projector. But no people, no animals, no light, just landscapes, empty and endless. The reflection beside me started changing too. It wasn't me anymore. It was wearing my uniform, but its face was hollow, just dark space where I should have been. It raised a hand, slow and deliberate. I didn't, and when it pressed its palm against the glass, the surface rippled. The sound that came after was soft, a faint hiss, like steam escaping from a crack. That's when I understood. The passengers weren't watching the world. They were part of it. Each mirror showed a different place, a different track, stretching out into infinity. And in every one, there was a train, moving, gliding, never stopping. An endless loop. The faces in the mirrors began to fade. The hum grew deeper, shaking my bones. And I realized that faint red glow beneath the rails. It wasn't light. It was fire. It was the ground itself burning, powering whatever this thing was. I turned toward the conductor, desperate, ready to beg. But he was gone. Only his hat remained on the seat. I reached for it, and when I did, the hum stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable. The kind that isn't quiet. It's empty. The mirrors all went dark. Every reflection vanished. And then, faintly, I heard the whistle again. Right behind me, I turned and saw the fog filling the car. Thick, white, swallowing the seats, the floor, the air itself. The passengers disappeared one by one until I was the only thing left. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The floor beneath me wasn't there anymore. Just rail, just fog. The last thing I remember was stepping forward. And as I did, the whistle screamed one final time, tearing through the world like it was splitting open. Then nothing. No sound. No air. No time. Just the endless track. If you ever find yourself out by County Road 6, you might still hear on a cold night that low whistle rolling through the fog. If you do, don't look for it, because once you see the light, it sees you too. And if you ever feel the ground hum beneath your feet, don't step on a rail. It remembers who walked there last. I remember the drive out there like it happened yesterday. The fog rolled in from the ocean that morning, thick and heavy, like it had weight. It clung to the trees and muffled every sound except the hum of my old patrol truck. Even the radio static felt quieter somehow, like the fog was swallowing it too. They'd call me around 6. 2 local fishermen hadn't come home. Their wives said they'd gone out before dawn toward the reefs near Gulls Point. I didn't think much of it at first. Boats break down, radios die, men get drunk on the shore. It happens. But by mid-morning, the Coast Guard said they hadn't picked up anything. No signal, no trace, just gone. So I drove. The coastal road wound like a scar between the cliffs and the sea. Every few minutes, I catch glimpses of the gray waves below, restless, endless. I'd been sheriff of Briar's Cove for 9 years, and I'd seen storms, drownings, all kinds of bad luck. But that fog, it wasn't like weather. It was more like presence. By the time I reached the old lighthouse road, visibility had dropped to maybe 20 feet. The air was so wet it beaded on my windshield like sweat. The headlight beams barely cut through it. I parked near the base of the cliffs, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped out. The world felt muted, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. I could hear the ocean, but it sounded distant, like it was coming from under the earth. The lighthouse loomed ahead, its light barely slicing through the mist. Every few seconds, the beam swept across the coast, pale and searching. Each time it passed over me, I felt the light on my skin, like it was touching me, not just shining. There was a figure standing by the railing near the edge. Old Man Harker, the keeper. He'd worked that lighthouse for almost 30 years. The kind of man who knew the sea better than people. When he saw me, he didn't wave. He just watched me approach. "Morning, Sheriff," he said finally. His voice sounded rough, like sandpaper on glass. "Morning. Harker," I said. "Got 2 missing fishermen. You see anything out there?" He turned toward the ocean. The fog moved like smoke around him, swallowing the railing, the rocks, the water. "I've been watching since dawn," he said, "but there's nothing to see. The beam don't reach far. It's like the fog eats the light." That line stuck with me. Eats the light. I leaned against the cold metal of the railing and stared out. The sea was just gray. No horizon, no waves, just shifting mist and faint motion beneath it. You could almost imagine shapes moving down there. "What about the signal buoy?" I asked. "It's still working?" He shook his head. "Stopped pinging last night. Same time their boat went out, I reckon." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the deep, rhythmic sweep of the light above us. The lens turning, the beam groaning as it cut through air that didn't want to let it through. "You've worked here a long time, Harker," I said. "You ever seen the fog this bad?" He hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "Once, long time ago, before you came here." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push him. Instead, I started walking down toward the shore. The rocks were slick, the ground soft with wet sand. Each step felt heavier than the last. I could feel the ocean before I could see it, smell it in the air, hear it breathe. Down near the waterline, I found the first clue. A cooler, white cracked, half buried in sand. The name called her written in faded black marker. One of the missing men. I knelt, wiped the salt off the lid, and looked around. No footprints, no drag marks, just the fog and the faint hiss of waves sliding against the shore. Something about that emptiness made my stomach tighten. I called it in, but the radio only gave static. I moved closer to the water to try again, and that's when I heard it. A low, hollow sound. Not quite a horn, not quite a groan. It came from out on the water, deep in the fog. At first, I thought it might have been their boat, maybe the engine backfiring or the hull shifting. But the longer I listened, the less it sounded like anything mechanical. It was too slow, too steady, like a breath drawn through a throat full of water. Hello. I called out, cupping my hands to my mouth. Anyone out there? My voice felt small against the fog. It didn't echo. It didn't even carry. It just vanished. The sound came again, closer this time. I turned back toward the lighthouse. Harker was still there, watching from above, a dark shape against the light. I waved at him, pointed toward the sea, but he didn't move, didn't even raise his hand. I started walking toward the pier. The wooden boards creaked under my boots, wet and warped. The fog grew thicker with every step, and soon I couldn't see the shore anymore, just gray on all sides. Halfway down the pier, the sound stopped. Then something bumped the post beneath me. It was solid, heavy. I pointed my flashlight down into the water, but all I saw was murk. Then, just for a second, I thought I saw something pale roll beneath the surface. A flash of white, smooth and human-shaped. I froze. My brain tried to rationalize, maybe a seal, maybe a piece of driftwood, but it felt wrong. The way it moved wasn't natural. It didn't float. It crawled beneath the surface, slow and deliberate. When the beam passed over it again, it was gone. I stood there, heart hammering, staring into the fog until the light swept across me from behind. When it did, I caught a glimpse of something else. Something standing at the far end of the pier. A silhouette, still, watching. Hello. I called again, forcing the word out. No answer. The beam passed once more, and the figure vanished. That's when I ran back to shore. By the time I reached the base of the cliff, I was gasping for air, soaked with mist. Harker was gone from the railing. The lighthouse door stood open, light spilling out like a wound. I climbed the steps, calling his name. No response. The air inside smelled of salt and old metal. My footsteps echoed as I made my way up the spiral stairs. At the top, the lens rotated slowly, bathing the room in flashes of blinding white. The machinery hummed, steady, mechanical, but there was no sign of Harker, only his coat, folded neatly on the chair by the window, and beside it, his hat, damp. Through the window, I could see the fog still pressing against the glass. Thick as smoke, the light swept out across it, revealing nothing but shifting gray. I picked up the coat. The fabric was warm, like he'd just taken it off seconds ago. Then, somewhere deep in the fog below, the sound came again. That long, drawn-out breath, part moan, part call. Only this time, it didn't sound far away. It sounded beneath the lighthouse. I went still. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The beam turned again, the light sweeping over the sea, and for just an instant, it caught something, a shape at the base of the cliffs. Something rising out of the surf. It looked like a man, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, like its limbs were bending where they shouldn't. I blinked, and it was gone. The light moved past, and darkness swallowed the coast again. I stayed there until the next morning. Didn't sleep, didn't leave, just watched the fog, waiting for it to clear. When it finally did, the sea looked calm, almost normal. The Coast Guard found the fisherman's boat drifting 3 miles out, engine off, nets torn. No sign of the man, and no sign of Harker either. They said maybe he fell, maybe the tide carried him out. That's what we wrote in the report. But I know what I saw, or what I think I saw. Now, every time I drive that stretch of coast, I look out toward the lighthouse. The beam still turns, slow and steady. But some nights, when the fog rolls in, I swear I see a figure by the railing, not waving, just watching. And when the light sweeps over the sea, I feel it again, that same quiet pressure, like the fog itself is breathing, waiting for something to come back. Or maybe for someone to join it. I didn't go back to the lighthouse for a week after Harker disappeared. Part of me told myself I was just giving the Coast Guard time to finish their sweep, but the truth is simpler. I didn't want to go. I kept thinking about what I saw that night, or what I thought I saw, the shape under the water, the way the fog moved, the sound that didn't belong to any machine or man or animal. I told myself it was exhaustion, that I'd been awake too long, breathing that heavy salt air. But the thought never really left. It just sat there, somewhere behind my ribs, waiting. Then one morning, I woke up to the sound of the sea again, except I don't live anywhere near it. My house is 5 miles inland. The ocean's a faint line on the horizon from my kitchen window. You shouldn't be able to hear it. But that morning, it sounded like it was just outside, low tide and whispering. That's when I knew I had to go back. The fog wasn't thick that day, but it was still there, hanging low, hugging the rocks, the kind that turns a world into a watercolor painting, soft, smudged, unreal. When I reached the cliffs, the light was off. The lighthouse stood still, its glass blank, the top dark. Nobody had taken over Harker's post yet. I parked the truck and walked the path down to the rocks. The tide was out, exposing long stretches of dark stone, slick with moss and seaweed. Pools of water lay between them, mirror still. The ocean was calm, too calm. No wind, no waves, just a faint hiss of shifting pebbles. I started walking along the rocks, scanning the horizon. Part of me hoped I'd find something, a piece of the fisherman's boat, a clue, anything to make sense of it. But the longer I stayed there, the more it felt like the coast didn't want to give up its secrets, like it was holding its breath. Then I heard it, a voice, distant, faint, but clear enough to make me stop. It came from somewhere ahead, near the edge of the rocks. I thought maybe someone from the Coast Guard had returned. But when I called out, "Hello? Sheriff's office," the sound stopped. I waited a few seconds. Then I heard another voice, quieter, then another. It wasn't just one person. It sounded like a group, 3, maybe 4, whispered each other, their words blending with the rhythm of the tide. I moved closer, trying to make out what they were saying. That's when I realized it wasn't coming from the land. It was coming from the water. The voices drifted across the surface, carried by the air like the wind was speaking. Every word stretched and warped, too far to understand but close enough to feel. I could swear I heard someone say my name. Daniel. Soft. Familiar. I froze. The hair on my arms rose. I turned toward the sea and saw them. Figures. At first, I thought they were waiting in the shallows, the way the fishermen sometimes do when they pull their nets. But as I watched, I realized their feet weren't breaking the surface. They were standing on it. There were 3 of them, maybe more. It was hard to tell through the haze. They moved slowly, not walking so much as gliding. Each step left faint ripples that spread out, then vanished like they'd never been there. I tried to focus on their faces, but the fog played tricks. Their shapes flickered, stretched. The air shimmered around them. They looked tired, bent, and one of them, I swear, wore a hat just like Harker's. My throat went dry. "Hello," I shouted again. "Hey, you need help?" No answer. The figures stopped moving. For a moment, they just stood there, heads tilted toward me, like they were listening. Then, in perfect silence, one of them raised an arm. It pointed straight at me. My chest went cold, the kind of cold that starts deep, like it's in your bones. The wind shifted, just a small gust, but enough to carry the voices again. I could hear them clearer this time, though the words didn't sound right. Too soft, too liquid, like they were being spoken through water. "Daniel, come down." It wasn't just my name. It was my mother's voice. I hadn't heard it in over 15 years. She drowned when I was a kid, caught in a rip current out near the same cliffs. And yet that voice, it was her. The same gentle tone she used when I was scared of storms. The same voice that used to call me in for dinner from the yard. "Daniel, it's all right now." I took a step back. My heel slipped on the wet rock, and I dropped to one knee. When I looked up again, the figures were closer. Not walking, just nearer, like the fog itself was pulling them toward me. I turned and started climbing back toward the cliffs. I didn't run. I couldn't. Every part of me felt heavy, like the air had thickened. The whispering followed me all the way up. "Daniel, don't go. Stay. We've missed you." When I reached the top, I collapsed beside the truck, gasping. The sound stopped instantly. The ocean below went silent again, flat and still. I sat there for a long time, trying to convince myself I hadn't really heard it, that it was just the wind catching the wave the wrong way. Sound of strange things near the sea. But deep down I knew that wasn't the wind. I didn't tell anyone. What could I even say? That the ocean spoke to me? That I saw ghosts walking on the tide? So I stayed quiet, kept working, handled the usual small town things, drunk fights, noise complaints, the occasional missing dog. But at night, the sea found me again. I'd hear it through the walls, that faint whispering hum, like people talking just out of earshot. Sometimes I wake up and find a thin layer of salt crusted on my window glass, though it hadn't rained in days. Once, I swear I smelled the lighthouse oil, that old kerosene stench, in my hallway. And every night, just before I fell asleep, I'd hear it, my name, spoken softly like a prayer. 2 nights ago, I went back. I don't even remember deciding to. I just woke up, got dressed, and found myself driving the coastal road again, headlights cutting through the mist. The lighthouse light was back on this time. That's what made me stop. It shouldn't have been. Nobody had been assigned to that post yet. But there it was, spinning slow, steady, sweeping across the water like before. When the beam passed over my truck, I felt that same pressure again, like the fog was alive and turning to look at me. I got out, walked closer. Each time the light swept, I caught glimpses of movement near the waterline. Small, quick shapes darting between the rocks. I couldn't see clearly, but I heard them. Faint footsteps, sloshing water, and the whispers, always the whispers. As I approached the cliff, I noticed something new. Tracks bear footprints pressed into wet sand, but not leading to the ocean, leading from it. They glistened on the beam, perfect and fresh. 5 toes, a deep heel mark, water pooling in the indentations. I followed them with my flashlight until they disappeared among the stones. They led straight toward the base of the lighthouse, and there, near the door, I saw it, a single item lie in the sand. Harker's badge, salt-eaten but unmistakable. I picked it up, turned it over in my palm. The metal was cold, so cold it burned. When I dropped it, it didn't fall. It floated, just for a second, hovering above the sand like it didn't belong to this world anymore. Then it sank, leaving no trace. That was when the voices started again. They didn't sound distant anymore. They were right there, all around me, woven into the air itself. Hundreds of them, overlapping, murmuring in that same slow rhythm, as if the ocean was breathing through their mouths. And beneath all of them, one voice rose louder, the same one from before. My mother, "Daniel, come home." I stumbled backward, eyes on the lighthouse. The door was open. Inside, the stairway glowed faintly with that same pale, pulsing light I'd seen under the water that night. Something moved at the top of the stairs, a shadow crossing the light, a man's outline, tall, thin. Harker, or something that wore his shape. He raised his hand in greeting, and when the beam passed over his face, it wasn't his eyes that looked at me. They were hollow, reflective, like the glass of the lantern itself. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I was back in the truck, engine roaring, tires spitting gravel. In the rear view mirror, I saw the light sweep one last time across the coast. And in that moment, I saw a figure standing all along the rocks. Dozens of them, their pale shapes flickering in and out with the fog. They weren't waving. They were waiting. Now it's been 2 days since then. I can still hear them when the wind blows from the sea. Sometimes I think I can see shapes moving in the puddles outside my house, reflections that don't match what's above them. I haven't gone near the coast again, but I know it's only a matter of time. The voices are getting louder every night. They're calling for me. And the worst part? I think I'm starting to understand what they're saying. I didn't sleep much after that night. Even when I closed my eyes, I still saw them. Those figures on the rocks, swaying like weeds in the tide. Sometimes I'd wake up gasping, half expecting to hear the ocean lapping against my floorboards. But it wasn't just nightmares. Something had changed along the coast. The townspeople started talking. Fishermen refused to go out past dawn. The air felt heavier. The fog came earlier, thicker. Even the birds had gone quiet. And then came the reports. Lights seen beneath the water near the cliffs. Not reflections, not lanterns. Lights that moved, glowing from below the waves like stars drowned under glass. I told myself I wouldn't go back. But that promise didn't last long. 2 nights ago, around midnight, my radio crackled. Just static at first. Then a voice broke through. It wasn't clear, but it sounded like someone trying to speak through water. Distorted, hollow, echoing. I caught only one word before it cut out. Help. Then silence. I traced the frequency. It came from the same coastal range near the lighthouse. Nobody should have been out there. That's what did it. That word. Help. Even if every part of me screamed to stay away, I couldn't ignore it. It's what I swore to do. To protect. Even when I didn't understand what I was protecting people from anymore. The road to the coast looked different that night. The fog was lower than before, hugging the ground, thick as milk. My headlights barely reached a few feet ahead. The trees on the roadside bent inward, their branches wet with dew, dripping like veins. I parked near the cliffs again. The air reeked of brine and rot. And up ahead, the lighthouse light was turning, slow and steady, its beams sweeping the horizon like a searching eye, except no one had turned it on. I stood there for a moment, staring. Every part of me wanted to leave, but curiosity, or something deeper, pulled me forward. The light swept over the ocean, and for the first time, I noticed it wasn't just bouncing off the fog. It was reflecting off something beneath it. The water shimmered, faintly at first, then brighter. Patches of gold and white pulsed under the surface, moving together in long, slow waves. I took out my flashlight, but it didn't help. The light from above was far stronger, and it seemed to drag my attention with it, like a tide pulling my mind downward. Then I saw it, shapes beneath the surface. Not fish, not coral, not wreckage. Buildings, rows of them, faint and fractured, stretching out under the water like a drowned town. Roofs, windows, what looked like streets, all coated in the soft glow of the lighthouse beam. It didn't make sense. There was no record of a town ever being there. That part of the coast had been open sea for as long as Briar's Cove existed. And yet there was a whole village lying still beneath the waves. My first thought was that it had to be a trick of light. Rocks, shadows, seaweed, maybe. But as the beam turned again, I saw movement. Figures drifting between the buildings. Dozens of them. Slow, graceful, as if they were walking through air instead of water. I remember whispering, "No, no, that's not possible." But they were there. They looked human. Their limbs floated, their heads tilted up toward the surface. The light brushed across them, and for just a second I saw faces, pale, hollow-eyed, smiling. When the beam passed again, some of them raised their arms, not in distress, but in greeting. It felt wrong, too calm, too knowing, like they recognized me. My chest went tight. I stumbled backward, my boots slipping on the wet stone, but I couldn't take my eyes off them. The light kept turning, and each time it did, more of the village appeared. A bell tower, stone steps, a cross half buried in sand, and there, at the center of it all, something that looked like a church. Its steeple leaned sideways, half collapsed, but the windows glowed faintly, a pulse in rhythm with the lighthouse itself. I didn't realize I was moving closer until I felt the sea foam around my boots. The water was colder than I remembered, and deeper. Each wave seemed to pull harder, as if the tide had a will of its own. Then I heard it, faint at first, like a whisper carried on the current. Voices again, hundreds of them, but this time they weren't calling my name. They were singing, low, mournful tones, rising and falling with the waves. Not a language I knew, but familiar somehow, like something ancient that lived in the bones of the earth. I stood there frozen as the light passed once more. That's when I saw them wave. Every figure in that sunken village, men, women, children, turned their faces upward and raised their hands in unison. Their movements were slow, dreamlike, but perfectly synchronized. They were waving at the lighthouse. At me. The song grew louder. It filled my ears until it drowned out the sound of the sea, of the wind, of my own heartbeat. And somewhere beneath it, I thought I heard a single, distinct voice, one that cut through all the others. It said, "Come back." Then the beam swept past, and the lights went out. All of it. The glow, the figures, the village, vanished into black water, as if it had never been there. The silence that followed was unbearable. I turned and ran back up the path, heart slamming against my ribs. My flashlight flickered. The radio in my pocket burst into static, and through the noise, I heard faint whispering again, a child's laughter, a woman humming, then a word, "Home." When I reached the truck, I slammed the door shut and just sat there. The lighthouse beam still turned, but now it looked weaker, slower, like it was struggling to stay lit. I started the engine, but before I could drive off, I looked once more at the sea, and I saw something rise from the water. It wasn't a wave. It was a roof. A peaked wooden roof, dark and dripping, emerging for just a moment before sinking again. The water poured off it like rain. I knew then that what I saw wasn't a trick. That town was real, or had been. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be seen. Maybe the fog had been hiding it all this time. And maybe Harker, the fisherman, maybe they hadn't drowned at all. Maybe they'd gone home. Since that night, I've been hearing a different kind of silence. It's not just quiet, it's heavy, like the world's holding its breath again, waiting for something to return. The fog hasn't lifted in 3 days. People are starting to disappear again. A boy from town went missing near the docks. His mother said she saw lights in the water the night before. The Coast Guard called it phosphorescence. Said it happens sometimes. But I've seen phosphorescence. It doesn't move. It doesn't pulse like a heartbeat. And it doesn't hum your name. I haven't been back to the cliffs yet, but I see the light from my house every night now. The lighthouse isn't supposed to be operational, yet its beam still turns, slow, steady, tireless. And every time it passes over the ocean, I see the same faint glimmer deep below, like the water itself remembers the shape of the village. Last night, I stood on my porch, staring toward the coast. The air was still. The fog glowed faintly from that distant light. And then, just for a moment, I saw a movement in the puddles at my feet. Reflections, little ripples spreading outward, though the air was calm. When I looked closer, I realized they weren't reflections of me at all. They were faces, faint, blurred, but they're pressed against the surface from beneath. Eyes open, mouths moving like they were whispering through the glass. I stepped back, but the water followed. The ripples spread across the ground like a thin sheet of sea, reaching toward me. And somewhere, far off, the lighthouse beam flashed one last time. The moment it did, I saw them, just for a heartbeat. All the faces rising in the glow. All the hands waving from below. I don't know what the sea is trying to show me. Maybe it's not a warning at all. Maybe it's an invitation. I keep dreaming about that place. The village under the water. The way the light moves through it like veins. The way the people there look at me, patient and calm, as if they've been waiting for me to remember something I've forgotten. And when I wake up, I always hear the same words. Come back. Sometimes I think I will. I don't remember deciding to go back to the lighthouse. It was like I woke up already halfway there. Headlights cutting through fog, hands tight on the wheel, radio dead silent. The road wound like it always did, but it felt different this time. Heavier, like the air itself was pushing me towards something I'd been avoiding. The light was still spinning when I arrived. Slow, methodical, sweeping across the cliffs and the sea like it had all the time in the world. The tower looked taller that night. Or maybe I just felt smaller. I parked by the railing and killed the engine. The silence that followed was deep, the kind that presses against your eardrums. The sea moved below, restless but quiet, the fog drifting in thin sheets over the rocks. I should have called someone, but who would I call? No one else believed what I'd seen. They said I was tired, that I'd been working too many nights. Maybe they were right. But when I looked at that light sweeping the water, steady, patient, I knew there was something waiting for me inside. So I went in. The door creaked open like it was breathing. The air inside was colder, damp. The floorboards groaned under my weight. I could smell salt and rust and something faintly sweet, like old flowers. The spiral staircase wound up the center of the tower, the steps narrow and slick with condensation. I started to climb. Each footstep echoed like I was walking inside a shell. The walls felt alive somehow, pulsing faintly with every turn of the light above. Halfway up, I heard something, a sound between a whisper and a sigh. It came from above me, soft, drawn out, almost human. I froze, hand gripping the railing. The metal was damp and cold under my palm. "Hello," I called out. No answer, but the whisper came again, closer this time. I kept climbing. The higher I went, the stranger got. The air grew thicker, warmer. My flashlight flickered, like it didn't want to stay on. Every few steps, I thought I heard footsteps matching mine, a half beat behind, like someone was following just out of sight. By the time I reached the top landing, the whispering had stopped. The door to the lantern room stood open. The light rotated slow, steady, bathing the space in rhythmic flashes. Bright white, then darkness, then white again. And there, by the window, I saw a figure. At first, I thought it was Harker. Tall, broad shoulders, uniformed. But when the light turned and passed over him, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't Harker. It was me. Same jacket, same badge, same tired face. The beam swept past again, and the other me looked up. His expression didn't change. He just watched me, calm and still, like he'd been expecting me for a long time. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. He turned toward the glass, staring out at the sea. When he did, I saw his reflection in the window, and it wasn't quite right. His eyes didn't match mine. They were darker, too dark, like two empty sockets filled with moving water. The sound of the waves echoed through the room, deep and steady, even though the windows were closed. Finally, I forced myself to speak. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer. He just tilted his head, the same way I do when I'm trying to remember something. Then he smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. It was sad, like he pitied me. "You came back," he said. His voice was mine, the same tone, the same rhythm, but hollow, stretched thin, like it was being repeated through the ocean floor. I took a step back. "What is this?" He turned to face me fully now, the light glinting off the badge on his chest. "Do you remember what you lost?" he asked. I shook my head, throat tight. "What are you talking about?" "The seer remembers," he said softly. "It keeps what we forget." He walked closer. His movements were wrong, not unnatural exactly, just slightly off, like he was half underwater. Every motion too smooth, too fluid. When he stopped in front of me, we stood inches apart. He looked exactly like me, down to the scar on my hand from when I cut it on fishing line as a kid, down to the faint gray in my hair. But there was something else, something beneath the surface of him, like his skin was too thin to hold what was inside. I could see faint ripples under it, like water pressing from beneath. I whispered, "You're not real." He smiled again. "Neither are you." And then the floor shook. The lighthouse groaned, deep and long, like a living thing stretching after sleep. The light above flickered faster, spinning quicker, until the whole room pulsed in and out of brightness. Through the window, the fog began to glow, and below us, the water wasn't water anymore. It was light. The entire surface shimmered, golden and soft, moving like breathing skin. And in that light, the outlines of the drowned village came back. The church, the streets, the people, all visible again, all glowing faintly beneath the waves. The reflection of the village rippled against the walls of the lighthouse, turning everything inside into shifting light and shadow. The other me walked toward the window. "Do you see them?" he said quietly. "They've been waiting." The light swept over his face again, and in that flash, I saw more clearly. He wasn't standing on the floor. He was standing in it. The boards around his boots shimmered like liquid, dark and rippling. His legs disappeared below the surface of the wood, like he was standing knee-deep in water that wasn't there. My voice shook. "Were you?" He looked over his shoulder. "I'm what you left behind." The words didn't make sense at first. Then he stepped forward, and I realized what he meant. When the light flashed again, I saw a second figure standing behind in the glass. Smaller, faint, but familiar. My mother. She stood in the reflection of the window, smiling that same soft smile she used to give me before bed. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear her. The other me whispered, "She's been calling you home." Something inside me broke. I ran forward, grabbed his arm, and my hand sank straight through. The surface of his skin rippled, cold and wet, like plunging my hand into a tidal-pool. I jerked back, heart pounding. He didn't flinch. He just watched me with those dark, water-filled eyes. "You can't hold on to what's already gone," he said. "You belong here with the rest." Behind him, the light flashed again, brighter than ever, and the reflection of the drowned village grew sharper. I could see figures waving up through the water, dozens, maybe hundreds, their hands pale and slow, reaching toward the light. And among them, I saw faces I knew. The fishermen, Harker, even children from the town, lost years ago, all looking up, all waiting. The light stuttered. The beam slowed. The hum of the machinery turned into a low, deep drone that vibrated through the floor. The other me stepped closer again, his voice barely a whisper. "You can fight it, but you can't stop it. The tide always comes home." He reached out a hand. I should have run. I wanted to, but something in me, something old and tired, made me stay. When his fingers touched mine, everything went silent. The sound of the sea vanished. The hum stopped. Even the beam froze mid-turn, cutting the world in half. One side dark, one side blinding white. And in that white, I saw everything. The village beneath the waves wasn't new. It was Briar's Cove, our own streets, our own church, our homes, all sunken, all glowing faintly under the surface. It wasn't a different place. It was a reflection, a memory of what would be left when the sea took the rest of us. The light flickered once more. When it dimmed, I was alone. No double, no voices, just the sound of the ocean again, rising fast, crashing against the rocks below. I stumbled to the window. The village had vanished, replaced by black, churning water. But far beneath the surface, I could still see faint glimmers, moving lights, twisting like eyes looking up. The beam began to turn again on its own, and for just a second, as it passed over the glass, I saw my reflection. It wasn't mine anymore. The face looking back had dark, water-filled eyes, the same as his, the same as the ones below. That was 3 nights ago. Now the fog never leaves. The light never stops turning. People in town say the sea sounds different lately. Deeper somehow, like something huge is breathing just below the waves. They think the lighthouse is warning ships away. But I know better. It's not warning. It's calling. Every night, I see the beam sweep over my house through the fog. Each time it does, I feel that same cold pull in my chest. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear my own voice whisper from somewhere far below, "Come home." And when I wake, my hands smell of salt.